You've probably noticed this. Your body is exhausted, but your mind refuses to clock out. You lie down, lights off, phone finally face down. And that's when the real noise starts. Old conversations replay. Future problems you can't solve at 2:42 main line up like a queue. You know you should be resting, yet it almost feels like your brain is addicted to spinning. And the weirdest party, the more you try to force sleep, the more awake you become. Tonight, we're going to do something quietly radical. Instead of fighting your mind, we're going to give it a new job. Listen, not to more worry, not to more news, but to gentle Zen stories and Buddhist wisdom. Stories designed not to hype you up, but to gently untie the knots inside your chest. You won't be told to just relax. You'll feel yourself relaxing without noticing when it started. You've been taught that rest is a reward you earn when everything is done. Zen flips this idea upside down. Real clarity comes because you rest, not after. While the world shouts, hustle more, think harder, push through, these ancient teachings whisper something completely different. What if nothing is wrong with you for feeling tired? And your tiredness is actually a message. In the next hours, you'll hear stories of monks, warriors, thieves, governors, and simple workers. But every one of them is secretly about you, your stress, your expectations, your craving for peace. We'll talk about the weight you carry that was never really yours to hold, about the invisible masks you wear to be loved, and how they quietly suffocate your soul, and about the strange miracle that happens when you finally stop performing for the world. This isn't a lecture, and it's not a test you can fail. You don't need to remember every teaching or repeat anything perfectly. Your only job is to be here, exactly as you are, with whatever thoughts you have right now. If your mind wanders, let it wander and just return to the sound of my voice. Little by little, you'll feel your nervous system understanding. Ah, we're safe now. Some people will fall asleep in the first 20 minutes. Others will listen longer, needing a bit more time for the mind to soften its grip. Either way is perfect. There's no right way to receive this. Even if you think, I'm not relaxing fast enough, that's just another story being told. The teachings will keep working in the background, like a gentle tide reshaping the shore. So, take a slow breath in and let it go as if you're putting down a heavy bag. This is your invitation to stop holding everything together for a while. Let the night hold you. Let the stories carry you. Let ancient Buddhist wisdom do what overthinking never could. Guide you, step by step, into deep rest and a quieter, kinder relationship with your own mind. Kenji is the kind of person whose heart feels everything. When he hears about war, he doesn't just understand it. He almost tastes the smoke and hears the crying. News about hunger doesn't stay on the screen. It sinks straight into his chest. He lies awake at night thinking of people he will never meet. To him, relaxing feels almost like betrayal. If the world is hurting, he believes he has no right to rest. From the outside, everyone at the monastery thinks he is an exemplary monk. He wakes up before dawn, meditates in silence, and never complains about his duties. He studies the scriptures with sincere attention and listens to the teachings with respect. If you saw him, you would probably say, he is so peaceful. But inside, his mind is a storm disguised as still water. His compassion, instead of becoming a bridge, is slowly turning into a heavy chain. Every piece of bad news adds another invisible stone to his back. He reads about injustice and feels guilty for having food on his plate. He hears about sickness and feels ashamed for having a healthy body. Even when he is walking through the quiet garden, his mind is in distant cities and suffering faces. The more he learns, the more he hurts. He confuses being informed with being emotionally crushed. For him, love and exhaustion have become the same thing. At some point, the tension inside becomes unbearable. Kenji does what many sensitive people secretly wish they could do. He goes to his master, Tanaka, and asks the question that has been burning in his heart. How can I sit here in calm meditation while the world is drowning? His voice shakes as he speaks, because he half expects to be judged for even wanting peace. Deep down, he is begging for permission to breathe. Tanaka doesn't answer with a long philosophy lecture. The old master simply points to a large stone lying in the garden. It is smooth from years of rain and wind, but clearly very heavy. Pick it up, he says quietly. Kenji obeys, surprised by the simplicity of the instruction. The moment he lifts the stone, he feels its weight like a sudden truth in his muscles. Then comes the strange part. Carry it with you for the rest of the day, Tanaka says. Take it to meditation, to meals, to your work, and to your rest. Do not put it down. Kenji hesitates, thinking it might be some test of strength or discipline, but he trusts his master too much to argue. So he wraps his arms around the stone and starts his day again, but this time with the world's weight made visible. Meditation, which was already difficult, becomes almost impossible. His arms shake while he tries to sit still. His back aches in a way that no posture adjustment can fix. Each breath feels shorter, tighter, less free. Around him, the meditation hall looks the same, but his inner experience is completely different. The stone doesn't care about his sincerity. It simply weighs what it weighs. At breakfast, the stone sits on his lap. He struggles to hold his bowl and eat without dropping everything on the floor. What used to be a quiet, almost sacred moment turns into a clumsy battle between hunger and gravity. A few monks glance at him with curiosity, but the master says nothing. Kenji does not complain because part of him thinks this is how the world feels. He believes that to care is to suffer without pause. While he works, sweeping floors and helping in the kitchen, every move becomes harder. The broom feels heavier, the pots seem bigger, and the distance from one side of the room to the other feels doubled. His focus is no longer on the task, but on the pain in his arms and shoulders. He silently repeats, "I must carry this. It is my duty." The stone has become the perfect symbol of his idea of responsibility. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion is not just physical, it is emotional. He starts to feel irritated, even resentful, without knowing exactly why. The world around him didn't change, but everything inside him is tense. He notices that he is less patient with others and less present in conversations. The stone is no longer just an object. It is shaping his character in real time. Compassion has turned into bitterness in disguise. When the sun begins to set, Kenji can barely stand. Sweat rolls down his face, even in the cool evening air. His breath is shallow, his back is screaming, and his hands are numb. Finally, he staggers back to Tanaka and admits what his pride resisted all day. "Master, I cannot carry it any longer. This weight is breaking me." Tanaka looks at him with calm, deep kindness. There is no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. "Then put it down," he says gently. Just 3 simple words, but they land in Kenji's mind like a thunderclap. Kenji lets the stone fall to the ground, and the heavy thud echoes in the garden. In that instant, relief floods his whole body like water entering dry earth. His shoulders drop as if they are rediscovering their natural place. His breath becomes deeper and more satisfying. He feels strangely light, almost as if he might float. Nothing outside has changed. The world still has wars, hunger, and cruelty. But his way of relating to that reality is suddenly different. For the first time, he tastes the difference between caring and carrying. Then, Tanaka explains the heart of the lesson. The suffering of the world is like this stone, he says softly. It is real, and it is heavy. Your compassion is beautiful, and you must never lose it. But you are not meant to carry all pain on your shoulders. You are meant to see it clearly, feel it deeply, and then put it down so your hands are free to help where you can. This speaks directly to modern life. Many people spend hours scrolling through news and social media, absorbing stories of tragedy from every corner of the planet. Their minds are full, but their actions are empty. At the end of the day, they feel heavy, anxious, and helpless. It is like carrying thousands of stones made of information, instead of choosing one place to act with clarity and love. Compassion without direction becomes paralysis. A wiser approach is to ask, what can I actually do from where I am? Maybe it is donating a portion of your income to a serious project you have researched. Maybe it is volunteering locally instead of drowning in distant crises. Maybe it is simply being emotionally available for someone close who is going through a hard time. These options don't fix the whole world, but they turn pain into movement, one stone at a time, handled with care. Kenji slowly begins to understand that protecting his inner peace is not selfish. A calm mind and a grounded heart are tools of service, not privileges. When he puts the stone down, he doesn't stop caring. He simply stops pretending he is the only one responsible for the world. And as this new peace begins to grow, another question rises quietly. If the weight of the world can be put down, what about the weight of needing to be seen, praised, and recognized? Somewhere else in the monastery, another monk is about to discover what it means to feel like a worthless stone and then realize his true value. At another monastery, far from Kenji's garden, a young monk named Hogan arrived with fire in his eyes. He had crossed mountains and rivers to meet the famous master Joshu, whose single words were said to awaken people on the spot. Hogan was not lazy or casual about the path. He had already practiced for years and secretly believed that with the right teacher, he would finally be recognized as someone special. In his imagination, Joshu would look at him and say, "This one has potential." That quiet desire for recognition traveled with him more faithfully than any travel companion. He threw himself into the monastery routine like a person trying to prove their worth to the universe. He woke before dawn, sat through long meditations, worked in the gardens, and listened carefully to every teaching. When others rested, he stayed up reading and reflecting, determined not to waste a single moment. Outside, it looked like deep devotion, and in many ways it was. But underneath, there was also a constant question beating inside his chest. When will the master finally notice me? Days became weeks, and weeks became months. Hogan watched as Joshu spoke at length with some students while barely glancing at him. New arrivals seemed to receive more personal guidance than he did. He began to collect these details like painful evidence in a silent trial against himself. Maybe I am not worthy, he thought, or maybe I am simply invisible. The harder he tried to stand out, the more ordinary and unnoticed he felt. One morning, the pressure inside became too much to hold. Hogan found Joshu in the garden, sitting calmly among the flowers, as if there were no problems anywhere in the world. With a mix of frustration and sadness, Hogan bowed and poured out his heart. He said he felt like a worthless stone lying in the courtyard, ignored and unimportant. He had come seeking awakening but found only silence, distance, and a painful sense of being overlooked. In his mind, no recognition from the master meant no value in himself. Joshu did not rush to fix Hogan's feelings with comforting words. Instead, he pointed to the stones that lined the paths and supported the buildings around them. He asked Hogan if he ever praised those stones, sat on them gently, or thanked them for their service. Hogan admitted that he never did, because stones simply existed in the background. The master then reminded him that the entire monastery stood because of those quiet, unmoving foundations. They asked for nothing, but without them, nothing else could stand. Then Joshu said something that cracked Hogan's inner story open. If you really understood what it means to be a stone, he explained, you would already be enlightened. To support others without demanding attention is a high teaching, not a low position. To be stable enough that people can build their lives on your quiet presence is not failure. It is deep strength. Hogan suddenly saw that his constant hunger to be seen had blinded him to what he was already giving. Like many of us, he had been so busy chasing a spotlight that he missed the light already shining through his everyday efforts. This story mirrors a very modern experience. Think of the person at work who does everything carefully, but the boss never mentions their name in meetings. Think of the parent who cooks, cleans, organizes, and holds the family together, but only hears complaints when something goes wrong. Think of the friend who always listens but rarely gets asked how they are doing. On paper, they look like stones in the background. In reality, they are the foundation without which everything else collapses. Zen calls this craving for attention ego hunger. It is the part of us that whispers, I only matter if someone else notices me. The ego is not evil. It is just afraid of disappearing. So it constantly scans for signs that we are special, admired, or above average. When those signs do not appear, it invents painful stories about being unworthy, boring, or forgettable. Ironically, this hunger often hides in places that look very spiritual or generous on the outside. From childhood, many people are trained to measure their worth with grades, awards, likes, and applause. They learn that being ordinary is dangerous, and that standing out is the only safe place. This mindset does not disappear just because someone starts meditating or reading wise books. They might swap trophies for spiritual approval, but the pattern stays the same. Instead of wanting a promotion, they want to be the most advanced student or the most awakened friend. Recognition is still the currency. Only the marketplace has changed. This is where something very subtle happens on the path. Spiritual practice, which was supposed to be a way of freeing the heart, becomes another competition. People compare their experiences, their insights, their number of retreats, or how long they can sit in silence. They may not say it out loud, but inside they are asking, who is ahead and who is behind? Hogan fell into this trap when he turned Joshu into a kind of judge and himself into a contestant. He forgot that Zen is not a race, but a way of walking. A powerful exercise is to notice what happens inside you when someone else receives praise. Do you feel genuinely happy for them, or does a small tightness appear in your chest? Do you start silently listing your own efforts, almost like a lawyer building a case? Maybe you think, I worked just as hard, or I have been here longer. These reactions are not signs that you are a bad person. They are simply a mirror showing where ego hunger still lives. Stones teach another way of living. They support without announcing. I am supporting. They do their quiet job whether anyone applauds or not. Translated into human life, this means doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. It means answering messages kindly, cleaning up after yourself, helping a colleague, or being present with a child without needing a medal for it. Over time, this kind of hidden integrity creates a deep self-respect that no compliment can replace. Zen often speaks about beginner's mind, which is very close to stone mind. Beginner's mind does not assume it is special or advanced. It stays curious and humble. Stone mind is similar, but with an added quality of stability. It is the attitude of someone who says, I am willing to be the quiet person others can lean on. They are not dull or passive. They are simply not obsessed with being impressive. Their strength is in showing up again and again without turning everything into a performance. You can experiment with this in a simple, practical way. Choose one day to do at least 3 kind actions where absolutely nobody will know it was you. Maybe you clean a shared space, leave an anonymous gift, or send support without your name attached. Pay attention to how your ego reacts when you do not get credit. You might feel resistance at first, almost like it is unfair. But if you stay with it, another feeling appears, a quiet joy that does not depend on anyone's approval. Little by little, you begin to see that your worth is not on the auction block of other people's opinions. It comes from the alignment between what you value and how you live. When those two match, you can sleep at night, even if nobody claps. When they do not match, no amount of recognition brings real peace. Hogan's awakening was not in finally getting Joshua's attention. It was in realizing that he had been valuable all along, just by sincerely practicing and serving. As this realization settles, something interesting happens. When you no longer need to be special, you finally have space to be real. You can step in and out of roles without losing yourself in them. You can be a leader in one room and a beginner in another without confusion. And that sets the stage for another powerful Zen teaching about identity itself, where even grand titles like governor or master are stripped away to reveal the simple human being beneath. That is the lesson waiting in the next story, when a powerful official must knock on a humble hermitage door and discover who he is without his title. In the capital city, Governor Nakamura lived wrapped in titles like layers of silk. People called him Your Excellency, Honorable Governor, Protector of the Province. Servants dressed him every morning in robes that announced his importance before he even spoke. Every meeting was full of protocol, bows, and carefully measured words. On the outside, it looked like success. On the inside, it felt like a performance that never ended. Over time, that constant performance created a very quiet kind of loneliness. Everyone approached the governor, but almost nobody approached the man inside the robes. People spoke to his position, not to his heart. They were careful, strategic, and a little afraid. He had power over their lives, so they showed him respect, but not intimacy. Respect without real connection begins to taste dry, like food without water. Nakamura started to notice something that scared him more than political threats. Even he was forgetting who he was without the role. He did not remember the last time someone called him by his personal name. He did not remember the last time he laughed freely without checking if it was appropriate. His entire identity had become fused with his job description. If you took away the titles, he did not know what would remain. Stories reached him about a Zen master named Kayu, who cut through illusions with very simple words. People said that this master did not care about rank, money, or reputation. They said he spoke directly to the human being in front of him, not to their title. The governor felt an ache of curiosity and hope. Maybe this strange teacher could see the person he himself had forgotten. Perhaps, for a short time, he could step out of the costume and breathe as a simple man. When he finally decided to visit the master, he did it in the only way he knew, with guards, attendants, and full ceremonial clothing. His arrival was announced with formal phrases, listing all his achievements and functions. The attendant proudly declared every title as if each word added more reality to the man behind them. To the governor, this was normal. To Master Caillou, it was just noise blocking the doorway to a real meeting. When the attendant finished the long introduction, Master Caillou responded with something shocking. He said he had no business with such a person and told them to leave. He did not insult the governor as a human being. He simply refused to interact with the pile of titles that had been presented. For a moment, the whole group froze in disbelief. They were not used to anyone saying no to their importance, but instead of exploding in anger, something very different happened inside Nakamura. It was like a mirror had been placed in front of him, showing exactly what was wrong. He realized the master had not rejected him. The master had rejected the mask. In that painful silence, the governor suddenly understood that if he wanted a real answer, he would have to show up as a real person. Politics could not enter the hermitage. Only a human heart could. So he did something very rare for a powerful man. He sent his guards and attendants away. He removed his heavy ceremonial robes, washed the makeup from his face, and tied his hair in a simple style. For the first time in years, there were no symbols of rank on his body. Standing there, he was not a governor, not an official, not a role. He was simply Daido, a man with questions. When he knocked again, there was no speech about titles, lands, or responsibilities. He just bowed and said, "Master, my name is Daido. I have come seeking guidance." These words were short, but they carried enormous weight. They were not spoken from a stage. They were spoken from the center of his own chest. And that was exactly what the master had been waiting for. This time, Master Caillou's entire presence shifted. His face lit up with genuine warmth and joy. He welcomed Daido inside as if greeting an old friend. The door that had been closed to the governor opened easily for the simple man. The teacher did not care about the position that ruled thousands. He cared about the heart that had finally taken off its armor. And that is where real transformation always begins. Most people are not governors, but almost everyone knows the feeling of living through roles. At work, someone is the manager, the expert, or the problem solver. At home, they are the responsible one, the strong one, or the one who never breaks. On social media, they are the funny friend, the successful one, or the spiritual one. When all these roles pile up, the question quietly appears: who am I when nobody is watching and nobody needs anything from me? Roles are not bad in themselves. Society needs doctors, teachers, drivers, parents, leaders, and thousands of other functions. The problem begins when a role stops being something we perform and becomes something we believe we are. Then, any criticism of our work feels like an attack on our existence. Any change of job feels like a kind of death. It becomes difficult to admit mistakes, ask for help, or show vulnerability. The mask starts controlling the person instead of the person using the mask. A gentle but powerful practice is to notice how you introduce yourself. Do you start with what you do or who you are? Do you feel proud only when you mention your achievements? What happens inside you when you imagine losing your job, your status, or your online followers? Fear that feels like falling into emptiness is often a sign that identity has become glued to a role. Underneath that fear is the part of you that is tired of pretending. Zen invites us to remember the simple name under all the labels. You might be a manager, but you are also Anna. You might be a director, but you are also Raphael. You might be a content creator, but you are also just a human being who gets tired, scared, and hopeful like everyone else. When you sit alone in a room and drop all your stories, you do not disappear. In fact, that is exactly when your real presence becomes easiest to feel. You can play with this in small, practical ways. At least once today, talk to someone without using your job or status as a shield. Ask a cashier how their day is going and actually listen. Talk to a family member not as the strong one, but as a human being who sometimes feels lost. Let yourself say, "I do not know," without rushing to fix it. These little moments are like knocking again on the master's door, but this time as yourself. When Dido discovered he could be welcomed without his title, something in him relaxed. He realized his position was useful, but not the foundation of his worth. Tomorrow he would still sign documents, give orders, and attend meetings. But now he knew there was a place inside him that belonged to no role. A place where he was just a living being trying to understand life. That quiet discovery gave him more real power than any official seal. Seeing this clearly changes how we look at other people too. We stop being overly impressed by titles and costumes. We also stop despising those who seem unimportant in society's eyes. The waiter, the cleaner, the driver, the security guard, the receptionist, all of them have a name and a story beyond the uniform. When we train our eyes to look for the person instead of the position, the world becomes less of a stage and more of a meeting place. Once you start seeing through your own roles, another question naturally appears. If I am not just my mask, then what exactly am I? Am I my thoughts, my emotions, my memories, my successes, my failures? Or is there something deeper that stays the same while all of that changes? That question will follow us into the next story, where a nun chasing enlightenment discovers that sometimes the container has to break before the real moon appears. On a quiet mountain, far from the noise of cities and expectations, lived a nun named Chiono. Her life looked perfect on the outside. She woke before dawn, meditated for hours, worked in the gardens, studied scriptures, and followed every monastic rule with care. Other practitioners admired her discipline, but inside, she carried a secret frustration that grew heavier with every passing year. She had done everything right, yet the awakening she longed for never came. She watched others around her having breakthrough experiences. Some students would suddenly see reality in a new way and burst into tears of joy. Others would speak of deep peace, of feeling completely free from fear for the first time. Each of these stories inspired her at first, but slowly they became painful reminders. Why them and not me? What am I doing wrong? That silent question followed her into every meditation. So she did what many sincere seekers do when they feel stuck. She pushed harder. She added more hours to her practice, sat longer, walked slower, breathed deeper, repeated mantras more intensely. It was like tightening every screw in a machine and still wondering why it would not start. The harder she tried to pull enlightenment toward her, the further it seemed to move away. Her effort, instead of calming her, began to exhaust her mind and body. One autumn evening, after a long day of intense retreat, she went to the well to bring water for tea. She used an old bamboo bucket held together by worn ropes. The bucket had served the monastery for years. just like she had. As she walked back through the moonlit courtyard, the water inside was perfectly still. On its surface, the full moon appeared as a flawless, glowing circle. For a moment, she forgot everything and simply admired that quiet beauty. Then, life did what life always does to structures that have reached their limit. The bottom of the bucket suddenly broke. The ropes snapped, the bamboo slats separated, and the water poured out onto the stone path. The moon's reflection disappeared instantly. 1 second it was there. The next second it was gone. Chiyono stood there, holding the useless remains of the container she had trusted for so long, watching water sink into the earth. In that exact moment, something inside her also broke open. The shock of the loss did what years of effort had not managed to do. She saw, not as an idea, but as a living truth, that what she had been chasing was like the moon's reflection in the water. Beautiful, inspiring, but not the real thing. As long as she was obsessed with holding the reflection perfectly, she missed the actual moon shining freely in the sky above her. She realized that her spiritual practice had become another form of grasping. She was trying to hold enlightenment the way she held the bucket, using this and that technique to keep everything together. More retreats, more books, more mantras, more strategies. None of those things were bad by themselves, but the way she was using them turned them into a prison of effort. Her identity had become the one trying to awaken, and that role was suffocating her. This is called attainment mind, the belief that peace, fulfillment, and awakening live somewhere in the future if we just work hard enough. It shows up far beyond monasteries. Someone thinks, I'll finally relax when I get that job, or I'll love myself when I fix my body, or I'll be spiritually ready once I finish these 10 courses. Life becomes a long staircase where the top step never actually arrives. The present moment is treated like a waiting room instead of a home. Think about how often you postpone living. Maybe you tell yourself, when I earn more, I'll spend more time with family. Or, when things calm down, I'll take care of my health. The problem is that later is a moving target. The mind is brilliant at inventing new conditions. Today, it says you need more money. Tomorrow, it will say you need more knowledge. The bucket of this and that never feels quite strong enough, so you keep patching it with more effort. Zen does not ask you to reject practice. It asks you to examine your relationship with it. Are you meditating like someone chasing a prize, or like someone resting in their own being? Are you reading wisdom teachings to become better than others, or to become more honest with yourself? The same activity can either deepen freedom or tighten the cage, depending on the energy behind it. Chiyono's awakening came when the structure of her effort finally collapsed. A very simple experiment can reveal where you stand. Tomorrow, try sitting quietly for a few minutes without trying to achieve any special state. No perfect posture, no ideal breath, no spiritual performance. Just sit like a person sitting, feeling your body, your breath, and whatever thoughts appear. Notice how quickly the mind says, "This is not deep enough. This is not special. I must be doing it wrong." That voice is exactly the attainment mind. When the bucket broke, Chiyono did not get a new one immediately. She stood in the empty shock of no water, no moon. In that emptiness, she discovered something the bucket had always hidden. The sky was still there. The real moon was untouched by the loss of its reflection. In the same way, awareness itself is never damaged by the collapse of your strategies, identities, or beliefs. What you are, at the deepest level, does not break when your plans do. Think of times when life has broken your buckets. A relationship ends. A career plan fails. A health diagnosis changes everything. In those moments, the reflection you were attached to vanishes. The life you imagined disappears in an instant. It hurts, of course. But if you look carefully, you may notice something else, too. A strange silence. A space where your old story no longer fits. In that space, a new kind of honesty becomes possible. This is why some people say that the worst thing that happened to them was also the beginning of their real life. The divorce that forced them to look at themselves. The loss that made them question what truly matters. The failure that stripped away fake identities and left only the raw, real person. Breaking is not comfortable, but it can be deeply cleansing when awareness is present. The bucket falls apart, but the river remains. None of this means you should sabotage your own life or throw away your responsibilities. It simply means you can hold everything more lightly. You can use meditation, study, and discipline as tools without turning them into proof of your worth. You can aim for goals without believing your value depends on achieving them. You can care deeply without clinging desperately. That shift turns effort from a burden into a natural expression of who you are. Chiono later wrote a short poem about her experience. With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together. Then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell. She was not celebrating the loss of the bucket. She was celebrating the discovery that she no longer needed the reflection to know the moon. In the same way, you do not need a perfect life, a perfect mind, or a perfect practice to touch your own depth. You only need the courage to stop gripping so hard. And when you start seeing that, a new question quietly rises. If awakening is not about chasing special states or fixing myself endlessly, then where is the miracle? If enlightenment is not fireworks or magic powers, what does a truly awakened life look like on an ordinary day? That is exactly what the next story explores, with a teacher who claimed his greatest miracle was something as simple as eating when hungry and sleeping when tired. Among all the famous Zen masters, Bankei was known for something very inconvenient for the ego. He did not care about looking impressive. While other teachers were surrounded by stories of powers and visions, he kept pointing people back to the simplicity of this very moment. That annoyed some visitors who wanted fireworks. They arrived hoping to hear about levitation, reincarnated saints, or secret mantras. Instead, they met a man who talked about breathing, eating, and being honest with yourself. One day, a visitor from another school came to test him. This man had followed a master who loved miracles. He had seen holy names written across the sky, people healed with a touch, and other events that looked like material for a spiritual blockbuster. With shining eyes, he described all these wonders to Bankei and then asked, almost challenging, "What miracles can you perform?" He was sure any true master would respond with something equally spectacular. Bankei listened patiently, not impressed, but not dismissive either. He did not deny the stories. He simply did not give them the importance the visitor expected. After the man finished his excited report, the question hung in the air. So, what's your miracle? Bankei could have played the game and told a legend. Instead, he gave an answer so simple that at first it sounded like a joke. Yet, under that simplicity lived a nuclear-level truth. He said, "When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep." The hall fell silent. Some probably thought, "Is that it? That's the big teaching." But for those with ears to hear, Those words were like an earthquake under daily life. Because if we are honest, most people do not truly eat when they're hungry or rest when they're tired. Their bodies do one thing while their minds are lost somewhere else, far from the present moment. Think about how you usually eat. How often do you sit down with your food and actually taste it, without checking your phone, answering messages, or replaying arguments in your mind? Many people finish a meal and barely remember the flavors. The body ate, but awareness stayed trapped in a mental movie. Banke's miracle was not having food. It was actually being there for the act of eating. That is rarer than it sounds. The same is true with rest. Notice how often you lie down physically, but stay standing mentally. The body is horizontal, but the mind is writing emails, fighting with people, worrying about tomorrow, and trying to solve problems that do not have solutions at midnight. Sleep becomes a negotiation instead of a surrender. Banke's miracle was to do one thing at a time with his whole being. When he slept, he just slept. No mental meeting in the background. This sounds almost childish in its simplicity, but that is exactly why it is so powerful. Children do this naturally. When they play, they only play. When they cry, they only cry. They are not scrolling through 3 problems at once. Adults call this state nothing special, and then spend thousands on retreats, apps, and books trying to return to it. Banke's life was a demonstration that what we are seeking is not complicated. We are just very distracted. You can begin to practice this miracle tonight in tiny, practical ways. The next time you drink water, stop for 10 seconds and only drink water. Feel the coolness in your mouth. Notice the swallow. Sense the refreshment. When you shower, just shower. Feel the temperature on your skin instead of running a full mental news broadcast from your day. These simple acts are like small doors opening back to your own life. The mind will complain. Of course, it will say, "This is too basic. Real spirituality must be something more." It's like someone standing in front of a waterfall saying, "Where is the water?" The truth is, the ego is addicted to complexity because complexity makes it feel important. If enlightenment is huge and difficult, then being almost there becomes a special identity. Banke cuts that identity in half with one stroke. Be here now, fully. Imagine someone listening to this while lying in bed. The body is tired, the eyes are heavy, but the mind is still spinning. Banke would not give that person a complicated ritual. He would probably say something disarmingly direct, like, "You are tired, so sleep. Let the world exist without you for a few hours. It will survive." Sometimes the bravest act of spiritual practice is to let go enough to rest deeply. This real miracle also transforms how we work. Instead of pretending to multitask and doing 5 things poorly, we train ourselves to give full presence to one thing at a time. When answering an email, just answer that email. When talking to someone, really listen instead of mentally drafting your answer. This not only improves results, it also creates a strange peace. Life feels less like a chaotic storm and more like a clear, single step repeated many times. There is another hidden layer in Banke's teaching. When he says he simply eats when hungry and sleeps when tired, he is also saying he trusts life's basic rhythm. He does not need to outperform nature. He is not arguing with his body's signals. Many modern problems come from exactly that argument. Drinking coffee instead of resting, scrolling instead of feeling, forcing productivity instead of honoring limits. The miracle is to stop fighting reality. As you start experimenting with this in your own daily life, you may notice something subtle. Ordinary moments begin to feel less dull. Washing dishes becomes strangely soothing. Walking to the bathroom becomes a mini meditation. Even brushing your teeth can feel like a small ceremony of care instead of a rushed obligation. Nothing externally changed, but your presence has turned the volume of life back up. It is interesting that people travel the world chasing rare experiences, yet ignore the most mysterious thing of all: awareness itself. What is more miraculous than the fact that you can feel your breath, hear these words, and notice your own thoughts? Bankei did not need to draw words in the sky because he had learned to read the sky that was already there. He did not need to create magic. He had stopped sleeping through the everyday magic around him. In the end, his real miracle was not a supernatural power. It was a natural power fully reclaimed, the power to inhabit each moment completely. That is available to anyone. No robe or title required. You do not need to be a monk to practice this. You only need the willingness to be where you are, doing what you are doing, with the person you are with, including yourself. Simple, not easy, but deeply transforming. And when you start living like this, another question quietly rises from underneath the surface of things. If being fully present in one breath, one step, or one bite of food already feels this different, what else is invisibly surrounding me that I have never truly noticed? What if I am like a fish searching for water while already swimming in it? That is exactly the paradox the next story will explore, with a young fish and an old turtle in the middle of a vast, invisible ocean. In a vast blue world, under waves you and I will never see, there was a little fish who felt strangely restless. Around him, everything was alive. Swaying plants, dancing light, drifting sand, other fish moving like silver arrows. And yet, inside, he felt a quiet dissatisfaction he could not name. He heard older fish and wise creatures talk about something called the ocean in a very special way, almost like humans talk about God or the universe. One day, he finally admitted to himself, "Everyone talks about this ocean, but where is it?" So he went searching. He swam up toward the bright surface until his fins ached. He swam down toward the dim deep until darkness hugged him like a blanket. He inspected rocks, caves, coral, even followed bubbles to see where they led. Everything looked familiar. Water, plants, animals. This can't be the ocean, he thought. This is just life. The ocean must be something bigger, more impressive, more mysterious. Sound familiar. Eventually, he found an old turtle resting calmly on a rock, eyes half closed, like someone who has seen many storms come and go. The young fish rushed over, full of urgency. "Excuse me," he blurted out. "Everyone keeps talking about the ocean. I've searched everywhere, but I can't find it. Can you please tell me what it is and where it is?" The turtle slowly opened his eyes and gave him a long, kind look. He had been waiting for that question. "The ocean," the turtle said softly, "is what you're swimming in right now." The fish froze. His little brain did a full stop. He looked left, right, up, down. "No, no," he protested. "This is just water. This is just my life. I'm talking about the big thing, the sacred thing, the magical thing, the ocean." The turtle smiled the way a true mentor smiles when a student is on the edge of seeing something huge and very simple. "My friend," he replied, "you were born in the ocean. You breathe the ocean. You move through it every second of your existence. It is outside you and inside you. You weren't told about it, so you could find it like a lost object. You were told about it so you could recognize what you've never been without. The fish felt his thoughts spinning. How could something so ordinary be the very thing everyone spoke of with such reverence? This is exactly what happens in spiritual life. People hear about Source, God, Tao, universal intelligence, and imagine it as something far away, behind clouds, beyond galaxies, hidden in temples or texts. Meanwhile, the most obvious miracle is being completely ignored. The fact that right now, awareness is happening. Thoughts are appearing. Emotions are moving. Breath is flowing. We swim in consciousness all day long and then ask, where can I find the divine? The young fish is just like someone who reads many spiritual books, but never looks at their own experience directly. They can quote teachers, repeat fancy concepts, debate philosophies, but ask them, what is happening in you right now? And often there is a blank pause. They are searching for the ocean in printed words while floating in the real thing every second. The living, breathing, sensing mystery of this present moment. If you want a practical way to see this, try something simple. Gently close your eyes for a moment and notice sounds. No need to label them car, bird, neighbor. Just notice that they appear in something. Then feel your body. Pressure, warmth, tension. Again, everything appears in something. That something is like the water in the fish's story. It is the field of awareness in which your entire life unfolds. You've never been outside it. Our main problem is not distance from truth, it's familiarity. Just like the fish thinks, this is only water. We think, this is only my mind, only my feelings, only my life. The word only is the blindfold. We get so used to existing that we stop being amazed by existence. It's like living beside a waterfall for so long that you tune out the sound and forget how powerful it is. The sacred becomes invisible because it is constant. Zen and Taoist teachings often say things like, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. That can sound frustrating until you remember the fish. If you give the ocean a shape, a costume, a specific image, you've already made it too small. The point is not to build a better mental picture. The point is to feel that you are always held by something larger, whether you understand it or not. Like a baby in warm water, safe without knowing why. You don't need to become mystical to live this. Imagine walking to the kitchen and, for just a few steps, noticing that everything is happening within a quiet space of awareness. Your thoughts about your day, the sound of your feet, the feeling of the floor, all of it floating in the same invisible water. That simple shift turns an ordinary walk into a doorway. You're no longer just moving through the world. You're moving through a living field of presence. Of course, the mind will resist. It will say, this is too vague. I need something concrete. I need proof. The mind is like a fish insisting, unless I can see a sign that says ocean this way, I refuse to believe. But notice, even the doubt appears in awareness. Even the demand for proof is something you can observe. You don't have to fight your skepticism. You just have to notice that too is swimming in the same water. This recognition changes how you relate to your problems. If you are a separate little fish in a hostile world, every difficulty feels like a personal attack. But if you are an expression of something much larger, like a wave on the surface of a vast sea, then challenges are still real. But they are not the whole story. The ocean is big enough to hold your storms without collapsing. That alone brings a kind of quiet courage. It also softens how you see other people. That annoying coworker, that family member who triggers you, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. All of them are fish in the same ocean, often just as confused and scared as you are. When you glimpse that, compassion stops being a moral rule and starts feeling like a natural response. How can you not feel tenderness for another wave that doesn't remember it, belongs to the same sea? If you want to bring this into daily life, you can use simple reminders. For example, each time you wash your hands, let the water on your skin remind you of the water of awareness you live in. When you sit down, notice that the chair supports your body and something deeper supports your whole existence. You don't have to name it. You just have to remember that you're not doing all of this alone. There is a deeper current carrying you. Still, even when we sense this ocean, another restlessness often appears. If everything is one, why do I still feel so hungry, so unsatisfied, so pulled by desires that never end? Why, if I'm already in the water, do I keep reaching for more and more better places to be? That question is as old as humanity. And to answer it, the stories turn from fish and oceans to mountains, and a simple man with a hammer and a dream he didn't know he already had. High in the mountains, where mornings smell like stone and cold air, there lived a simple stonecutter who didn't know he was wise. His days looked almost identical from the outside. The same paths, the same quarry, the same tools resting on the same shoulder. Yet inside, his heart was strangely peaceful. He woke, worked, ate, rested, and slept without constantly comparing his life to anyone else's. At first, he never thought of himself as poor, unlucky, or less than. He simply lived. That started to change the day he was called to work on a rich man's mansion. For the first time, he walked through gates taller than houses, past fountains and gardens that looked like they belonged in a dream. Marble glowed in the sunlight. Servants hurried quietly. The stonecutter felt something new in his chest, a sharp little stab. He went back home and his hut looked smaller. His bowl looked simpler. His own life suddenly felt not enough. He sighed. If only I were rich, then I would not have to sweat like this every day. In that moment, something mysterious in the universe seemed to answer. In the story, a voice grants his wish, but you can imagine it as the raw power of desire itself. The next thing he knows, he's no longer a stonecutter. He's a wealthy man, living in a grand house with servants and silks, and everything he thought would finally make him whole. For a little while, it feels like heaven. But comfort has a strange side effect. It quickly becomes normal. The same walls that once impressed him now fade into the background. One hot afternoon, he sees the king passing by in a shaded carriage, fanned, honored, protected. The rich man feels heat on his own face and thinks, being rich isn't enough. A king, that's real power. If I were king, then I'd be satisfied. Again, the wish becomes reality. Now he is king, high above the crowd. At first, this feels like the final level. Servants, power, respect, a whole world rotating around him. But the sun keeps blazing without any respect for titles. The king sweats under his robes and realizes that the sun has more power than any crown. I wish I were the sun, he thinks. And once more, in this magical tale, he becomes exactly what he craves. A burning star, flooding everything with light and heat. Surely this must be enough. As the sun, he feels immense, touching oceans and mountains, cities and fields. But soon, thick clouds roll in and block his rays. People below find shade and relief, and he notices something uncomfortable. Even the great sun can be hidden. Clouds are more powerful than I am, he thinks. If only I were a cloud. And so he becomes one, dark and towering, covering the sky and deciding where to send rain. For a moment, it feels perfect. Then he falls as rain and slams into something that does not move. A mountain, hard, solid, unmoved by water or wind, stops him again and again. A rock, he realizes, that is true power. Unchanging, untouchable. I wish I were a rock. Now he stands tall on the mountainside, feeling unbeatable. No heat can burn him, no cloud can move him. Seasons pass, and still he remains. The stonecutter thinks he finally reached the top, until one day he hears a familiar sound, tap, tap, tap. A small figure is cutting pieces from his side, shaping him, taking chunks away. That little human, with simple tools and sore muscles, is changing what the rock is and where it goes. The all-powerful mountain is being carved by a man. He is more powerful than I am, the rock realizes. I wish I were a man again. And just like that, he finds himself back where he started. A stonecutter, tools on his shoulder, feet on the same path. But something important has shifted. He looks at his simple hut and feels a warmth he never noticed before. He holds his tools and feels gratitude instead of resentment. The mountain paths that once seemed boring now feel like old friends. He realizes that the life he kept trying to escape was never the real problem. The problem was the idea that happiness lived in some other position, far away from where he already stood. You might recognize versions of this in your own life. I'll be happy when I get that job. Then the job comes and soon feels normal. I'll be happy when I move to that city. Then the city becomes routine. I'll be happy when I find a relationship, lose weight, gain followers, make more money. Each time we arrive at the place we were sure would fix everything, the mind quietly moves the goalpost. Desire shifts costume, but the inner emptiness does not automatically disappear. This doesn't mean wanting more is wrong. Desire is part of being human. But the story shows what happens when we believe happiness lives only in the next upgrade. We become spiritual tourists, always packing to leave for a better life, rarely unpacking fully where we are. The stonecutter's final transformation is not becoming sun or rock. It's learning to inhabit his original life with new eyes. Same house, different heart. Same work, different relationship with it. You can experiment with this in very practical ways. Instead of asking, how can I change my whole life to finally feel good? You can try, how can I bring a little more presence, gratitude, or care into the life I already have? Maybe that means making your morning coffee a slow ritual instead of a rushed chore. Maybe it's treating your current job as a dojo where you train patience, communication, or leadership, even if you plan to change later. Little shifts, big ripples. There is also an honest, uncomfortable question hidden in this tale. If you woke up tomorrow with the money, status, or body you think would solve everything, how long before your mind found the next missing piece? That question is not meant to crush your dreams, but to free you from their illusion of absolute power. Goals can guide your actions, but they cannot give you a self-respecting relationship with yourself. That part is built from the inside out. What truly changes at the end of the story is awareness. The stonecutter starts to see his life, instead of just using it as a stepping stone to another life. The same bowl of rice, the same path, the same mountain now feel sacred because he understands their value. He still works, still sweats, still gets tired. But the constant, if only, in his mind has softened. He no longer feels smaller than everyone else just because they live differently. When contentment starts to grow, the mind often tries one more trick. Okay, fine, I'll be grateful, but only after I fix, control, and perfect everything. That's when the next teaching appears on the path. A reminder that true growth is not just about big decisions, but about how awake you are in the tiniest details of everyday life. The stonecutter has rediscovered joy in his own skin. But there is still one more step. Learning what real awareness looks like when you're not meditating or dreaming of another world. And that's where the next story quietly enters. Not with palaces or mountains, but with something almost comically simple. A pair of shoes, a wet umbrella, and a spiritual teacher who thought he had already arrived, until a single, ordinary question revealed just how asleep he still was. In a rainy countryside temple, there was a monk named Tenno who, on paper, had everything a spiritual teacher could want. He had studied for years, meditated until his legs went numb, memorized sutras, and received formal recognition as a Zen teacher. People bowed to him. They called him Master. Inside, part of him relaxed into a dangerous idea. I've finally arrived. I know enough now. That thought is very human and very subtle. One day, wanting a final polish to his understanding, Tenno decided to visit a legendary Zen master named Nan-in. It was a long, muddy walk. Rain fell in steady sheets. By the time he reached the temple, his robe was damp and his umbrella dripping. He carefully left his wooden clogs and umbrella on the porch, as tradition required, straightened his clothes, and entered with all the dignity of a certified teacher. Inside, he expected a deep conversation about high-level meditation, advanced insights, maybe even some secret teaching reserved for real masters. Nan-in greeted him kindly, offered tea, and they talked for a bit. Tenno waited for the great wisdom to begin, ready to impress and be impressed. Then, out of nowhere, the old master asked a question that felt almost insulting. It was so simple it sounded silly. I noticed you left your clogs and umbrella at the door, Nan-in said calmly. Tell me, did you place your umbrella to the left of your shoes or to the right? Tenno's mind froze. Of all the topics they could discuss, the famous master was asking about umbrella placement. He searched his memory and realized, with a small shock, that he had no idea. He had done it completely on autopilot. Noticing his confusion, Nan-in didn't laugh or scold. He just let the silence stretch a bit, like a mirror held up to Tenno's mind. Finally, Tenno had to admit, I don't know. At that moment, something in him cracked open. Here he was, a recognized teacher of mindfulness, unable to recall a simple action he had taken moments earlier. He wasn't as present as he thought. That stung more than any formal critique. The master gently pointed out what the moment revealed. It's easy to be aware in special situations, meditation cushions, ceremonies, teaching moments. Much harder in small, ordinary actions like placing shoes and umbrellas. Tenno began to see that his practice was divided. One Tenno sat in meditation, focused and mindful. Another Tenno lived daily life half asleep, moved by habit and hurry. He thought he'd arrived, but he'd only changed rooms. This story hits close to home for a lot of people on any path of growth. You might read books, watch deep videos, go to therapy, listen to podcasts, and feel, I'm very conscious now. But then someone cuts you off in traffic. Your child spills juice again. Or your partner says something triggering. and your awareness vanishes in a flash. The umbrella is already on the porch, and you don't remember how it got there. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about seeing clearly. Tenno's real awakening didn't happen when he collected spiritual titles. It began when he saw how shallow his awareness was in everyday actions. That moment of honest humility is priceless. In fact, one of the strongest signs of maturity is the ability to say, "I'm not as awake as I thought, and that's okay, as long as I'm willing to keep learning." You can turn this into a playful practice. For one day, choose a simple action as your nan-in test. It might be hanging your keys, placing your shoes, or setting down your phone. Each time you do it, try to be fully there. Feel the movement of your hand, the texture of the object, the breath in your chest. At night, ask yourself, can I remember at least a few of those moments clearly? If not, no guilt, just curiosity. What shocked Tenno wasn't just forgetting his umbrella. It was realizing how much of his life he lived in the same unconscious fog. Walking, eating, talking. So much of it was mechanical. He had been teaching students to be present, while he himself was often somewhere else in his head. That realization made him drop the inner label teacher and pick up something far more precious: the willingness to become a true student again. He asked Nan-in if he could stay and study under him, not as a master visiting another master, but as a beginner. And that's what he did. For 10 more years. 10 years of training that weren't about exotic experiences or complicated philosophies, but about learning to bring the same awareness to arranging his sandals that he once reserved only for meditation. The work was quiet, repetitive, and profoundly transforming. In your own life, this kind of deepening doesn't require a monastery. It might mean being fully present while washing dishes instead of rushing to finish. It might mean listening to a friend without planning your reply. It might mean noticing your breath for 3 seconds before you unlock your phone. These micro moments are like tiny doors. Each time you walk through one consciously, your whole inner landscape changes a little. There's also a gentle warning in Tenno's story. The phrase, "I already know this," is one of the quickest ways to shut the door on real growth. When your mind says, "Oh, awareness, gratitude, mindfulness, I've heard all that," you can smile and ask, "Yes, but am I actually living it?" That question doesn't shame you. It invites you back to the present, where your real life is actually happening. The beautiful part is that waking up in small moments has a calming effect on the nervous system. When you're truly here while brushing your teeth or making your bed, your mind gets a break from constant mental noise. This is deeply soothing, especially before sleep. Little by little, your days stop feeling like a blur and start feeling like a series of clear, gentle frames you actually remember being inside. Tenno discovered that enlightenment wasn't a medal he could hang on the wall. It was more like the quality of attention he brought to every breath, step, and gesture. The more he practiced, the less he needed to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need big spiritual fireworks, just the quiet joy of actually being present for his own existence. And yet, even this level of awareness doesn't protect anyone from strong emotions. Because here's the next layer of the journey. You can be mindful and still feel anger, fear, jealousy, or shame arise. The question becomes, what happens in that split second when a powerful emotion hits? Do you get swallowed by it and enter a private hell? Or can you recognize the doorway and choose something different? To explore that, the stories shift from umbrellas and clogs to armor and swords, and a warrior who wanted to know where heaven and hell really begin. Oh, ChatGPT dis. In the time of samurai and old wooden temples, There was a warrior who had seen more blood than sunrise. His armor was scratched, his sword was worn, and his eyes carried that special tiredness of people who've survived a lot, but never really rested. One day, this warrior went to visit a famous Zen master named Hakuin. He wasn't looking for philosophy or poetry. He wanted a straight answer. Is there really a heaven and a hell waiting for me after I die? That's the kind of question only someone who's met death up close dares to ask. Hakuin looked at him calmly and asked, "Who are you?" The warrior pulled himself up with pride. "I am a samurai," he replied. That word meant something huge in his world. Honor, loyalty, courage. But the master's response cut sharper than any sword. "You? A samurai?" he said with contempt. "You look more like a dirty beggar than a noble warrior. What kind of lord would let someone like you protect him?" The words landed like insults dipped in acid. You can imagine what happened inside that man's chest. His pride, carefully built over years of battle and discipline, burst into flames. His face grew hot, his heart pounded, and his hand moved instinctively to his sword. The master didn't stop. "And that sword," Hakuin added, "is probably so dull it couldn't even cut off my head." That was it. The warrior's anger boiled over. He began to draw his blade, ready to defend his honor the only way he knew. At that precise moment, steel half drawn, rage at its peak, Hakuin said quietly, "Here, open the gates of hell." The warrior froze. It was as if someone had pressed pause on his whole life. In that tiny gap, he suddenly saw himself from the outside, a man ready to commit murder because his ego had been scratched. Not to protect anyone, not for a noble cause, just for pride. He saw the hell inside his own reaction. Realizing what was happening, the warrior's hand began to tremble. He slid the sword back into its sheath and dropped to his knees. The anger that had been burning so hot turned into deep shame, and then into gratitude. He bowed his head in front of the very man who had just insulted him. Hakuin looked at him with softness and said, "Here open the gates of paradise." Same room, same people, same armor, completely different world. This story is like a spotlight on something we all live, almost every day. Heaven and hell are not just places out there after death. They're emotional worlds we step into with our next reaction. One message on your phone can feel like heaven if it brings good news, or like hell if it triggers insecurity. But the message itself is just pixels. The real fire or peace is born inside your own mind. Hakuin showed the samurai that brutally fast. Think about your own gates of hell. Maybe it's when someone questions your competence at work. Maybe it's when your partner uses that one tone that pierces you. Maybe it's money stress, seeing your body in the mirror, or scrolling social media and thinking, everyone is ahead of me. In a split second, your inner weather changes. Your jaw tightens, your breath shortens, your thoughts get sharp and dark. That's your sword leaving the sheath. Notice that Hakuin didn't lecture the samurai with long explanations about karma or doctrine. He didn't say, "Listen, anger is bad, calm down." He provoked the reaction on purpose so the warrior could see his own hell opening. Live without theory. Life does something similar with you. It keeps sending you teachers disguised as traffic, delays, family drama, unexpected bills, or people who push exactly your buttons. Not to torture you, but to show you where your gates are. A practical exercise. Next time you feel anger or deep irritation rise, don't rush to justify it. Pause, just one breath, and silently say to yourself, "Ah, Here are the gates of hell, not as self-attack, but as recognition. You might still feel the heat, but now there's a bit of space around it. That tiny bit of space is enormous. In that space, you can choose to put the sword back. You can walk away, breathe, or respond differently. That choice is your first step into paradise. Paradise here doesn't mean rainbows and harps. It means the inner peace of not being fully controlled by your emotions. You still feel them, but they don't hold the steering wheel. Imagine a version of you who can be deeply hurt and still not lash out, who can feel criticism and still stay curious, who can be tired and stressed but not poison everyone around. That version of you is not a fantasy. It's a skill you grow one reaction at a time. You might say, "But they were wrong. They shouldn't have talked to me like that." And maybe you're right. Hakuin did insult the samurai. People will be unfair, rude, clumsy, selfish. But that's the genius of the story. Heaven and hell were not decided by the master's words. They were created by the warrior's response. The outer trigger was the same. The inner world changed completely depending on whether he drew the sword or bowed. If you want examples from daily life, think of disagreements. Two people can hear the exact same criticism. One explodes, enters hell, starts a war that lasts days. The other takes a breath, feels the sting, and says, "Tell me more. What exactly bothered you?" That doesn't mean they agree. It means they stayed at the gate and didn't rush in. In relationships, that skill is worth more than any perfect partner fantasy. It literally changes the climate of a home. This doesn't happen by accident. You can train for it, just like a warrior trains for battle. But your training ground is everyday life, not a battlefield. Each small irritation becomes a chance to strengthen your awareness muscle. Someone is late, gate. Someone interrupts you, gate. Your plans fall apart, gate. Every time you notice, "I'm about to swing my sword," and you soften even 10%, you are rewriting your destiny in real time. A powerful way to practice is to pay attention to your body. Before your mind says, "I'm angry," your body has usually given signals: tighter chest, clenched fists, heat in the face, faster heartbeat. In that moment, you don't need philosophy. You just need to notice and breathe. One or two slow breaths into that area can be enough to stop you from saying or doing something you'll regret later. This is how heaven and hell shift from theory into everyday choice. There's also a deeper tenderness in this story. Hakuin wasn't humiliating the samurai to feel superior. He was risking his own safety to give the man a direct experience of his true power, the power to choose how he meets his own emotions. That's the same power you're being invited to discover. You may not wear armor or carry a sword, but you carry sharp words, silence, distance, sarcasm. Those are weapons, too. How you use them opens doors. Once you see this, you stop begging life to be easy and start asking a better question. Who am I becoming through the way I respond? Suddenly, every conflict becomes a kind of dojo, a training hall. The point isn't to never feel angry again. The point is to learn how to walk through anger without losing yourself. And yet, even when we understand this, we still keep trying to control everything outside of us first. Which is why the next story appears like a perfect mirror. It's about a man beating his horse in frustration, convinced that if only the animal behaved, his life would be fine. A Zen master watching from nearby gently points out a shocking truth. The real wild horse isn't out there. It's the mind inside the man. And if that horse isn't trained, no amount of external control will ever bring real peace. O ChatGPT dice. In a dusty clearing near a small village, a warrior was losing his temper with a horse that refused to cooperate. The animal danced nervously, eyes wide, muscles shaking, while the man shouted and beat it in frustration. From a distance, it looked like the problem was simple: a stubborn horse and a strong rider trying to fix it. But watching nearby was a Zen master named Bankei, who saw something much deeper happening than a man and an animal in conflict. Bankei called out, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The warrior ignored him at first, too caught up in his anger to hear anything. He tightened the reins, struck the horse again, and tried to force obedience through sheer will. You can almost feel the energy there, the belief that if he just hits harder, yells louder, or pushes more, reality will finally submit. Sound familiar? Bankei tried again, this time with a tone that carried a different kind of authority. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Finally, the warrior stopped, breathing hard, sweat on his forehead, irritation burning in his eyes. He marched over to the master, expecting either criticism or fear. Instead, he met a calm gaze that seemed to see right through his armor. "What are you yelling about?" the man snapped. "This horse won't obey. I'm trying to train it." Bankei looked at him with quiet compassion and said, "Rather than beating your horse, why don't you correct yourself and train your own mind?" Simple words, but they hit harder than any strike the warrior had given the animal. In one sentence, Bankei turned the mirror around. Most of us believe, deep down, that if we can just get the outside world under control, we'll finally be at peace. If our partner behaved properly, if our kids listened, if traffic flowed, if the body cooperated, if money stabilized, then our anger, anxiety, and frustration would disappear. In that mindset, life is a constant battle with horses that don't obey us. The problem is always out there. But what Bankei is pointing to is brutally honest. The real wild horse is inside. It's the mind that wants everything to go exactly its way. It's the impatience, the entitlement, the fear that erupts when things don't follow our script. The horse is just being a horse. The computer is just being a computer. The people around you are just being human. The storm is inside your own head and chest. Think about the last time something small set you off. Maybe your phone lagged, your internet failed, a dish broke, or someone didn't reply. Your reaction probably had very little to do with that event itself, and a lot to do with accumulated tension inside. That's your inner horse, restless, jumpy, already on edge before anything even happens. No amount of external beating will calm it down. This is where the story becomes deeply practical. Instead of asking, "How do I make everyone and everything obey me?" the real question becomes, "How do I work with my own mind when things don't go my way?" That's a very different path. It's less glamorous than shouting orders at life, but infinitely more powerful. Because you can't control the weather, but you can learn to walk in the rain without cursing the sky. One way to train your horse is to start noticing the very first signs of agitation. Before an outburst, there is always a buildup. Tension in your jaw, a change in your breathing, that hot feeling in your chest or throat. If you can catch it early, you don't need to beat or suppress it. You can simply pause, feel it, and breathe. That small choice changes the entire trajectory of the moment. Let's bring this into a very simple example. Your computer crashes while you're working late. Old habit. Slam the desk, mutter curses, maybe rage eat something, and go to bed feeling defeated. New practice. You notice the rush of stress. You literally say in your mind, "Okay, my horse is scared and angry right now," and you take 3 slow breaths before doing anything. Only then you decide what to do next. Same problem, different rider. Another way to see it. The horse is your nervous system. If you spend your days overloading it with stress, caffeine, doom scrolling, constant noise, and zero pauses, it will be skittish and reactive when anything goes wrong. But if you build small islands of calm, like a quiet walk, a warm shower with attention, or a slow cup of tea without your phone, you're actually training the animal to trust you. A calm rider calms the horse. Bankei's phrase, "correct yourself," is not about blame, it's about reclaiming power. As long as you believe that peace depends on everyone behaving as you wish, you're a prisoner of the outside world. The moment you accept that the real training is internal, you stop wasting energy beating horses and start using that energy to become a wiser rider. That shift alone lightens your whole life. A really honest exercise is to ask yourself, when I'm upset, how much of my energy goes into trying to change others? And how much goes into calming and clarifying my own mind? If the answer is 90% outward and 10% inward, you now know why you feel exhausted. Instead of multiplying conflict, imagine investing more attention in understanding your reactions, your stories, your fears. That's real spiritual courage. Ironically, when you work on your own mind first, your impact on the outside world becomes more effective. A parent who disciplines from calm clarity, not rage, is far more respected. A boss who corrects from steadiness, not panic, leads better. A partner who communicates from grounded honesty, not emotional explosions, transforms the relationship. The horse senses the difference immediately. And there's another layer here that touches your rest and sleep. An untrained mind doesn't just react during the day, it also keeps galloping at night. You lie down, lights off, but inside there's a horse still running, replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, rewriting the past. Training your mind during the day, pausing, breathing, responding instead of reacting, slowly teaches your inner horse that it's safe to rest when night comes. Once you see this clearly, you start to look at difficult situations differently. Instead of thinking, "Why is this happening to me?" you quietly ask, "What is this moment showing me about my own mind?" That question doesn't magically fix problems, but it keeps you from throwing gasoline on fires that were already burning inside. It guides you gently toward a different kind of strength. Most people don't need more motivation. They need less noise. Because the truth is, the more you try to feel peaceful, the more your mind fights back like a toddler at bedtime. And nobody tells you this, but chasing calm is often what keeps you anxious, like running after your own shadow. If you've been feeling tired, overstimulated, or strangely empty, even when life is fine, this is for you. Not because you're broken, but because you've been living with your inner world on hard mode. Tonight, this won't be a lecture. This will feel like coming home. Welcome to Buddhism Every Day, your sanctuary for ancient wisdom and inner peace. Over the next 3 hours, you're not just listening to stories. You're learning how to use them. These teachings survived 2,500 years because they solve the same modern problems we still pretend are new. Stress, overthinking, attachment, comparison, the pressure to be everything for everyone, and the quiet fear that life is passing while your mind is somewhere else. If that hits you, good, because that means you're awake enough to change. Here's the paradox. You don't become peaceful by defeating your mind. You become peaceful by understanding it, the way you'd understand a friend who's panicking. That's why Zen stories work. They bypass the arguing brain and speak directly to the part of you that knows. Like a mirror that doesn't judge, it just shows you what's happening. So you'll hear ancient parables, but you'll recognize your relationship, your job, your cravings, your emotions, your habits, and suddenly it clicks. Oh, that's me. So get comfortable. Let your shoulders drop like you're taking off a backpack you forgot you were wearing. You can close your eyes if you want, or just listen like someone who finally allowed themselves to rest. Some people use these teachings for sleep, others for healing, and others for a quiet reset after a heavy day. There's no wrong way to do this, except rushing. Tonight, you're allowed to be slow. And one small request before we begin. If this channel helps you even a little, subscribe to Buddhism every day. Because the mind doesn't change from one beautiful video. It changes from repeated contact with what's true. Now, breathe gently and let the first story open the door. Because what you think you want might not be what you actually need. He didn't notice it at first, because the burning house rarely looks like fire. It looks like a normal week, a normal phone screen, a normal tired face in the mirror. It looks like a calendar packed tight, and a mind that keeps whispering, just push a bit more. And that's the trick. Modern suffering often wears a polite outfit and calls itself responsibility. But underneath, anxiety is heating the walls. Overthinking is filling the rooms with smoke. And the person inside keeps saying, I'll rest later, like later is guaranteed. In the old Zen-style parable, the children keep playing while the house burns around them. In modern life, the toys are different, but the spell is the same. Notifications, cravings, achievements. He scrolls to relax and somehow ends up more restless, like drinking salt water for thirst. She buys something new and feels a quick spark. Then the spark fades and asks for another spark. They chase productivity like it's oxygen, but somehow they still can't breathe deeply at night. The fire isn't drama. It's gradual, quiet, and unbelievably convincing. A mentor would say this gently. The house burns fastest when people pretend it's not burning. It's not weakness to admit stress. It's wisdom, because denial is expensive. He once told himself, I'm fine, while his shoulders stayed up near his ears all day. Then his body sent a bill. Headaches, a tight chest, sleep that never felt like sleep. That's when he learned a blunt truth. Your body won't negotiate forever. It will eventually raise its voice, not to punish, but to protect. Here's the part most people miss. The children didn't ignore the father because they were bad. They ignored him because they couldn't feel the danger as real yet. And that's how many adults live. Smart, capable, and still hypnotized by the immediate. The brain loves quick rewards. It's basically a bargain hunter with no long-term plan. So when peace feels slow, the mind labels it boring and runs back to stimulation. Then it wonders why inner peace feels so far away. That's why the father doesn't just scream, "Get out!" He uses a skillful invitation. He speaks the children's language and offers carts, something they actually want. In real life, this means wise change often begins with something small and attractive. Not meditate for an hour, but take 3 breaths before touching the phone. Not fix your whole life, but remove 1 match from the room today. Because awareness grows better through kindness than through bullying. He learned a funny thing about his own mind. It argues like a lawyer when it's addicted. It says, "This is fine," while the nervous system is sweating in the background. It says, "One more video," like one more is ever truly one more. It says, you'll start tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes a museum of broken promises. So the mentor taught him to spot the oldest lie in modern life. Not now. That phrase is gasoline, and most people don't even smell it. The burning house can be a relationship where every conversation drains the soul. It can be a job that eats Sundays, then pretends it's just temporary. It can be a group chat that turns the mind into a ping-pong table all evening. It can be self-criticism, the kind that sounds like motivation but feels like humiliation. And it can even be success, when success becomes a cage with velvet walls. If peace keeps getting postponed, something is already burning. So the mentor gives a simple test. No incense, no mystery, no fancy posture. He asks the person to notice how they feel right after they escape into distraction. Do they feel truly restored, or do they feel slightly more scattered and tense? That answer is honest, and it doesn't need a philosophy degree. If the escape leaves the mind louder, it wasn't rest. It was avoidance in a cute outfit. And avoidance is how people stay inside the burning house while calling it coping. Here's a practical move he swears by, because it's almost too easy to fail. Every morning, before the day kidnaps attention, they ask one question for 30 seconds. What am I so absorbed in that I'm missing the bigger picture? Then they take 3 slow breaths. Long exhale, like opening a window in a smoky room. No fixing, no judging, no dramatic vow. Just seeing clearly for a moment. That moment is a door, and doors are how freedom starts. When the mind says, "But I don't have time," the mentor chuckles softly, because no time is often code for no silence, and silence can feel threatening at first. Stillness makes people meet themselves, and that's exactly what distraction tries to prevent. So he tells them, start with 30 seconds. If you can scroll, you can breathe. If you can worry, you can pause. Worry already proves your brain has energy. The practice is not adding effort. It's removing unconscious effort. He also suggests something surprisingly effective. A smoke alarm list. On paper, write 3 signs the house is heating up. Tight jaw, doom scrolling, snappy tone. Then write 3 exits. Walk outside for 2 minutes. Drink water. 3 breaths. 1 stretch. This isn't self-help fluff. It's training awareness like a firefighter trains response. And when they forget, he reminds them, forgetting is part of learning, not a moral failure. Consistency beats intensity almost every time. If they want a deeper anchor, he points to simple books that feel like calm hands. The Miracle of Mindfulness, Thich Nhat Hanh, is gentle, practical, and human. Wherever you go, there you are. Jon Kabat-Zinn makes presence feel doable. He tells them to read just a few pages at night, not as homework, but as a soft reset. Because the mind imitates what it repeatedly touches, panic or peace, smoke or fresh air, and a small nightly ritual can change the whole emotional climate. The mentor also uses one more analogy, because the brain loves pictures. He says the nervous system is like a phone battery that keeps draining in the background. Even if the screen looks normal, too many apps are running. Worry, comparison, control. Mindfulness is closing the hidden tabs, not by force, but by noticing they're open. The person doesn't need a new personality, just fewer fires competing for attention. And that realization alone can feel like relief washing through the chest. A strange thing happens when someone steps outside the burning house, even for a minute. They realize they weren't lazy. They were overloaded and unconsciously coping. They realize peace isn't a trophy. It's a skill, a muscle, a home address they forgot. And once they taste a little clarity, they start seeing smoke sooner before it becomes flame. That's the beginning of transformation. Not a giant leap, but a new kind of seeing. And once seeing changes, the next lesson becomes unavoidable. How to bend when the wind rises. In fact, he notices the next obstacle always shows up right on time. The world doesn't suddenly become quiet just because someone chose awareness. Noise remains, people remain, traffic remains, moods remain, life keeps blowing its winds. So the question shifts from, how do I escape everything, to something braver and smarter. How do I stay steady inside the storm without turning into a rigid, angry statue? And that's exactly where the bamboo is waiting, swaying calmly in the distance. He used to think patience meant waiting for life to finally cooperate, like a person standing at a bus stop, tapping the foot, glaring at the road, offended by time. But one day he noticed something uncomfortable. Life didn't cooperate even on good days. Someone always drove too slow. Someone always spoke too loud. Something always went wrong. And the mind, if left unchecked, treated each small inconvenience like a personal insult. That's when he realized impatience isn't a time problem. It's a control problem. In the story, the bamboo grove becomes a classroom during a storm. The wind howls, stalks creak, leaves rustle like they're clapping offbeat on purpose. One monk hears it as torture. Another hears it as music. Same wind, same sound, same night, different inner world. And that's the hidden teaching most people don't want to admit. The disturbance isn't always out there. It's often the decision inside. He had his own bamboo grove moment, not in a monastery, but in a checkout line. A cashier was slow. The person in front was asking 10 questions, and his patience was melting. His mind started writing a whole angry novel. People are so incompetent. This is ridiculous. And then he caught himself, almost laughing, because he wasn't late for anything serious. He was just addicted to speed. Like modern life trained him to panic if anything slows down. It wasn't urgency. It was inner rigidity wearing a serious face. A mentor would tell him this with a half smile. You're trying to control the wind. That sentence stings a little because it's true in too many areas. People try to control traffic, moods, co-workers, family habits, even the past. Good luck with that. And when reality refuses to obey, they tighten up, like a fist closing around air. That tension feels like strength, but it's actually suffering being reheated every minute. The fist doesn't fix the storm, it just tires the hand. So the patient monk points to bamboo and says, in essence, look closely. Bamboo doesn't argue with wind, doesn't take it personally, doesn't demand a calmer forecast. It bends, sways, adapts without losing its roots. That balance is the whole secret. Flexible on the surface, grounded underneath. Modern people often do the opposite. Rigid on the surface, uprooted inside. They look fine, but one small gust and they snap at someone they love. The mentor explains a non-obvious idea. Flexibility is not weakness. Flexibility is intelligence in motion. A tree that never bends becomes firewood after the first real storm. A mind that never bends becomes bitter, exhausted, and strangely fragile. And the irony is brutal. Rigidity pretends to protect peace, but it's what kills peace first. Because peace needs space, and rigid minds leave no space. There's a practical reason this matters, and it's not spiritual poetry. It's biology. When someone resists what's happening, stress hormones rise. The body goes into fight or flight. The brain's wise center gets quieter, and the reactive center gets louder. That's why people say things they regret when they're irritated. It's a temporary hijack, but when they accept the moment, the nervous system softens and clarity returns. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's regaining access to intelligence. He learned a small trick that sounds almost silly, but it works. When irritation shows up, he labels it wind. Not idiot driver, not annoying coworker, not my family is impossible, just wind. Because labeling it as wind removes the personal drama from the event. It turns a battle into weather. And you don't yell at weather. You dress appropriately and keep walking. Then the mentor adds a second step. Soften the body first. Because the body often locks before the mind even forms words. Jaw clenched, shoulders lifted, breath shallow. This is the physical signature of resistance. So he tells the student, drop the shoulders 2 centimeters, unclench the jaw, exhale slowly. Not to be calm as a performance, but to stop fueling the fire with tension. Calm starts as a mechanical choice before it becomes an emotional feeling. Now comes the bamboo practice for the week. Simple enough to remember on a bad day. Whenever someone feels triggered, slow driver, passive-aggressive comment, messy roommate, pause, ask one question. How can I bend like bamboo here without abandoning my roots? That's important. Bend does not mean tolerate disrespect or become a doormat. It means respond wisely, not reflexively. It means choosing the smallest effective action instead of the loudest emotional one. He gives examples, so it's not just a pretty metaphor. If a coworker is rude, bending like bamboo might be, let's keep this professional, calmly. If family keeps pushing buttons, it might be, I hear you, but I'm not discussing this now. If traffic is slow, it might be turning the moment into training, breathing, posture, patience reps. And if the mind is the one creating chaos, bending might mean, okay, mind, I see you. Not arguing with thoughts, not feeding them, just letting them blow through like wind. A subtle humor helps here, because the mind loves taking itself too seriously. He tells the student, your irritation is a weather report, not a personality. Some days it's sunny, some days it's stormy, but none of it is the whole you. That line alone can break the spell of self-righteous anger, because anger often feels like truth, but it's usually just pain dressed up as certainty. And bamboo doesn't need certainty. It needs balance. Of course, the student asks the classic question, so I just accept everything? The mentor shakes the head. No, bamboo bends, but it doesn't uproot itself. Meaning, accept what you can't change, act where you can, and don't poison your own peace. Boundaries exist, decisions exist, courage exists, but they land better when delivered from calm rather than from clenched teeth. Firmness without hatred is advanced strength. And here's the twist. Once someone stops fighting the wind outside, they begin noticing the bigger storm inside, the endless chasing, the restless craving. They realize irritation is often the symptom of a deeper habit. The mind always wants more. More speed, more control, more approval, more certainty, more progress. Right now. So bending like bamboo becomes the doorway into a deeper question. What am I chasing so hard that I can't sit in peace? That question opens the next lesson, like a hidden door. Because the next story isn't about the wind outside, it's about the search inside. The kind of search that turns life into a treadmill, even when nothing is wrong. The student starts to sense it. The mind can run for years and still feel not there yet. And that's when the ox appears, the one that was never truly lost. But first, the student has to admit something softly. Maybe the chase itself is the fire. He thought enlightenment was somewhere far away. Like a hidden city on a mountain he had to climb until his lungs burned. So he worked, studied, meditated, improved, and pushed harder every week. And still, that quiet ache stayed. I'm not there yet. That sentence became his background music, even on days that looked successful, because the mind can turn any path into a chase. In the story, a devoted seeker feels stuck after years of sincere effort. Not lazy, not careless, actually the opposite. Too serious, too hungry for progress. He's doing all the right things, and that's what makes it so frustrating. Because when effort doesn't deliver peace, people start suspecting something is wrong with them. They don't just feel stuck, they feel defective. And that feeling becomes fuel for even more striving. The master answers with an ox story for a reason. An ox is simple, earthy, real. No spiritual fireworks, no fancy philosophy. It's the perfect symbol for something steady that you depend on every day. The farmer loves the ox like people love their sense of security. When the ox seems gone, panic takes over the whole system. Because the mind hates missing, even more than it hates pain. He searches like many modern people search for happiness. He runs through fields, calls names, keeps checking, keeps trying, keeps forcing outcomes. He skips meals, ignores rest, forgets his own life while chasing the answer. It's like refreshing social media for a feeling, then refreshing again, then again, or switching jobs hoping the next one will finally fix everything. The search becomes a lifestyle, not a moment. Then he finds tracks, and the hope hits like caffeine. Finally, proof I'm getting somewhere, the mind says, and it becomes addicted to proof. That's why people obsess over signs, numbers, progress charts, external validation, because proof feels like relief, even if it's temporary relief. It's the same pattern as chasing likes, money, or applause. A tiny hit of certainty. Then the craving returns. The trail goes deep, and the farmer suffers for it. He climbs hills, crosses streams, scratches himself on branches, and keeps going anyway. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Suffering can start to feel meaningful. When people struggle, they often think, this must be working. Look how hard it is. So they confuse pain with progress and exhaustion with virtue, and the mind quietly turns the journey into a performance. When the farmer finally reaches the meadow, the ox is just there, peaceful, unchanged, not dramatic, not apologizing, not even aware of the chaos. And that moment hits like a slap of clarity. The ox wasn't lost in the way he imagined. The farmer was lost in his story about loss. He was lost in the frantic energy of not enough. And the ox was waiting like reality often waits, patiently. This is what the mentor whispers. Many people don't suffer from lack. They suffer from the belief that something essential is missing. So they keep chasing the missing thing, and chasing becomes their identity. But peace doesn't behave like a prize you win by sprinting. It behaves like breathing, already happening when you stop interfering. And that shift changes the whole relationship to life. He explains it with a simple image. Thirst and cups. A person can collect the most beautiful cups in the world and still be thirsty. A new relationship, a new phone, a new plan, more cups, same thirst. The thirst is inside, and the water is presence. But presence doesn't sparkle like a new purchase, so the mind ignores it. until exhaustion forces honesty. Modern life trains the seeking mind like a treadmill with good marketing. Upgrade yourself. Maximize, optimize, be more, do more, never stop. Even self-improvement can become a trap if it's fueled by self-rejection. If the reason to grow is, "I'm not okay," growth becomes endless punishment. But if the reason to grow is, "I'm already worthy," growth becomes natural. Same action, totally different inner energy. So the mentor offers a practical practice that sounds too small to matter. Before any improvement activity, sit for 60 seconds and do nothing. No fixing, no planning, no analyzing. Just notice awareness itself. Notice breathing happening without effort, like a quiet friend doing its job. And then ask, what if peace is the starting point, not the finish line? That question softens the whole nervous system. He gives real-world examples so it lands in normal life. If someone is chasing money, the practice is pause before the next purchase. Feel the craving in the body. Then breathe until the craving loses its authority. If someone is chasing love, the practice is stop auditioning and start showing up honestly. If someone is chasing achievement, the practice is work hard, then fully rest without guilt. Because guilt is just another form of chasing. He also recommends a couple books that speak plainly to the seeking mind. The Miracle of Mindfulness, Thich Nhat Hanh for gentle, daily presence. Wherever you go, there you are. Jon Kabat-Zinn for practical clarity without hype. And if they like blunt honesty, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, can hit hard. Not because books save anyone, but because good words point back to what's already here. Like a finger pointing to the moon, not the moon itself. Then he adds one playful line that disarms the ego. If your peace depends on perfect conditions, you'll need to control the universe. And nobody has that budget, not even the most organized person with 6 calendars. So the goal becomes simpler. Stop treating life like a test you're failing. Start treating it like a moment you can inhabit. That's when the ox feels close again. But there's a catch, and the mentor doesn't hide it. When the chase quiets down, emotions you've been outrunning often show up. Anger, jealousy, pride, fear, like dust floating up when the room finally stops shaking. People think that means they're going backward, but it's usually the opposite. It means they're finally still enough to see what was always there. And that's exactly where the next lesson begins. Because the next story isn't about chasing outside. It's about what happens when the mind gets stirred like water in a pool, when emotions make everything blurry, and people try to fix it by stirring harder. So the mentor turns gently toward a quiet mountain pool and says, "Look, what do you see when the water is calm? And what do you see when it's disturbed?" And the mirror lesson is waiting, right on the surface. He used to think strong emotions were enemies. Anger meant he was failing. Jealousy meant he was bad. Pride meant he was arrogant. So whenever a heavy feeling rose, he tried to smash it down like a whack-a-mole game. And the strange part is, the harder he fought, the bigger the feelings got. It was like trying to calm a lake by punching the water. All effort, no clarity. The story begins with a monk who's exhausted by his own inner weather. He meditates, prays, tries to be pure, and still the weeds keep growing. That word "should" sits on his shoulders like a backpack full of rocks. I should be calm. I should be peaceful. I should not feel this. And when reality doesn't match the ideal, shame steps in to finish the job. So now he suffers twice, from the emotion and from the war against it. The Buddha doesn't lecture him. He walks him to a clear mountain pool. No complicated theory, no spiritual flexing. Just water, and this is already a teaching. Wisdom often speaks through simple things. The pool reflects perfectly when it's still. It doesn't need effort to reflect. It needs non-interference. That's the part modern minds hate, because they want to do something. He tells the monk to look at his reflection. The monk sees himself clearly. Tension, worry, that tightness behind the eyes. Then Buddha gives a strange instruction. Stir the water hard, like you're trying to erase the reflection. So the monk swirls and swirls, and of course, the image disappears. Not because it was solved, but because it was distorted. And this is what people do with emotions all day long. They stir the water with distractions, phone scrolling, overeating, picking fights, overworking, shopping, gossip, busy, busy, busy. It's not that they're evil, it's that they're trying to avoid seeing clearly. The reflection vanishes, and they think, "Ah, I fixed it." But really, they just made the water cloudy. And cloudy water doesn't show truth, it hides it. He had a personal example of this that made him laugh later. He once got a message that triggered him. Short, cold, 2 words, like a slap. We need to talk. Instantly, the mind became a movie director. Worst-case scenes, betrayal plots, humiliation edits. He started stirring the pool, typing long replies, checking the phone every minute, replaying conversations. And after 1 hour of mental chaos, nothing had actually happened. Only his nervous system got wrecked. The drama wasn't in the message. It was in the stirring. Buddha then tells the monk, remove your hand and wait. Do nothing. Observe. Let the water settle by itself. And slowly, naturally, clarity returns. The reflection comes back without force. That's the lesson. The mind becomes clear not by violence, but by stillness. Emotions settle when they're given space, not when they're attacked. The mentor explains the non-obvious point. Fighting emotions often feeds them. Anger fed by resistance becomes rage. Fear fed by resistance becomes panic. Sadness fed by resistance becomes depression mixed with shame. But emotions met with calm attention start to change shape. They lose their authority voice and become simple sensations. He describes it like muddy water in a jar. If you shake it, it stays cloudy. If you leave it alone, the mud sinks and the water clears. This is not magic, it's nature. And the mind is also nature, just more dramatic about it. The trick is letting nature do its job. Then he makes it practical with a simple mirror method. When a strong emotion rises, name it gently: anger, jealousy, fear, pride. Not I am angry, but anger is here. That small grammar shift is powerful because it stops identity fusion. You're not the storm, you're the sky that notices it. And yes, the ego hates that because the ego wants to be the storm. He adds a body step because emotions live in the body first. Ask, where do I feel this? Tight chest, hot face, clenched jaw, stomach knot? There's always a location. Then breathe into that area slowly, like you're giving the feeling permission to exist, not permission to control you, permission to be seen. Seen emotions soften. Hidden emotions sharpen. For people who like structure, he gives a tiny routine that fits real life. When triggered, do a 90-second pause before responding. Sip water, inhale for 4, exhale for 6, and relax the jaw. Then ask one question. Am I stirring the water right now? If yes, don't send the message yet. Don't make the decision yet. Don't do the dramatic thing yet. Wait until the water is clearer. He also recommends simple tools, not guru stuff. A basic journal. 2 lines only. What I feel and what I need. A walk without headphones for 10 minutes. Let the mind settle naturally. And if someone wants guided help, a short mindfulness practice is enough. 5 minutes, not a marathon. The goal isn't to become a monk. The goal is to stop turning every emotion into a war. He slips in a little humor because it helps people stop worshiping their thoughts. He says, your mind is like a group chat with no admin. Everybody talking, nobody listening, and one guy sending panic emojis at 2 a.m. So the practice is not to delete the group chat. It's to stop replying to every message. Read, breathe, and let it pass. And here's the subtle loop toward the next story. Once someone learns not to stir emotions, they start noticing another trap. Some emotions aren't just storms. They're sweet. Pleasure, validation, comfort. Just one more, the sugar-coated cravings. And those can be more dangerous because they feel like friends. So the mentor leans in and says, what if the sweetest thing is also the hook? That's when honey shows up. And the next teaching begins. He didn't hate pleasure. He hated the way pleasure quietly started running his life. Not in one dramatic moment, but in tiny little bargains. Just this once. One more scroll. One more snack. One more episode. One more purchase. And then he'd look up and realize the day was gone, and his mind felt emptier. That's when he understood. Some pleasures don't satisfy. They recruit. In the story, a disciple asks the question a lot of people are afraid to ask. If attachment is a problem, am I supposed to live joyless? Because deep down, people don't want wisdom that feels like punishment. They want peace, sure, but they also want laughter, love, comfort, good food, and a life that feels warm. So the Buddha doesn't say avoid pleasure. He says, let's look at what pleasure does when it becomes your boss. He tells the story of a hunter who doesn't use force. He uses temptation, and that's the genius of the metaphor. Addiction rarely starts as violence. It starts as sweetness. Honey on a leaf, beautiful, harmless looking, even natural. But hidden inside is poison you can't see, smell, or notice until it's too late. The deer is not stupid. It's cautious, graceful, alert, like any person who thinks, that'll never happen to me. It circles the leaf, checks the air, debates a bit. Then it takes a tiny taste. And that's how traps work. They begin with just a taste. Once the brain gets a hit, caution gets quieter. The deer experiences a moment of bliss. And that's important. The story doesn't deny that pleasure can feel amazing. That's why people fall for it. The first like feels good. The first win feels good. The first compliment feels good. The problem is the after. When the body comes down and the mind says, again. The mentor makes a very modern analogy here. He says pleasure can become like salt water. The first sip feels like relief when you're desperate. But the more you drink, the thirst grows. So you chase more relief. And the relief creates more need. That's not weakness. That's wiring. He shares a personal example that's painfully relatable. He once bought something online after a stressful day, convincing himself it was self-care. The checkout felt like a warm blanket, quick dopamine, instant comfort. The package arrived and it was fine. But the excitement faded fast. And now he wanted the next thing. That's when he realized he wasn't buying objects. He was buying a momentary mood. Then he connects it to modern honey, that's everywhere. Social media engineered for compulsive loops. Endless short videos that never let the mind finish a thought. Food designed to hit the brain like a jackpot. Even productivity can be honey. The dopamine of being busy, so you don't have to feel. The point isn't technology bad. The point is mindfulness or slavery. He gives the key distinction in plain language. Enjoyment is when you can stop. Compulsion is when you can't stop, even when you want to. Enjoyment leaves you more present afterward. Compulsion leaves you foggy, guilty, restless, or craving more. Same activity, totally different inner posture. So the practice is not to become a hermit. It's to become a conscious taster. Before indulging, pause for 5 seconds and ask, am I choosing this or am I being pulled? Then take one slow breath and feel the body. If the body is tense and desperate, it's usually craving, not enjoyment. He adds a second step that people love because it works immediately. Stay for the whole taste. If you eat, eat with full presence. No phone, no rushing. If you watch something, watch intentionally, set a time, then stop. If you scroll, scroll with a timer. When it ends, it ends. This transforms honey from a trap into a moment of real appreciation. He also gives a post-pleasure check, which is like a truth test. After the pleasure fades, ask, do I feel nourished or needy? Nourished means calm, satisfied, okay with silence. Needy means itchy, restless, hunting for the next hit. That question reveals the poison without drama. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The mentor adds a light joke to keep it human. He says, if you're negotiating with yourself at midnight, you already lost the debate. Because craving becomes a lawyer when you're tired. It will bring evidence, witnesses, and emotional speeches. So you don't argue with it. You breathe and let it pass. No courtroom needed. Then he makes it even more practical with substitutions that don't feel like punishment. If someone craves sugar at night, try warm tea and a slow breath first, then decide. If someone craves scrolling, try a 2-minute stretch, then decide. If someone craves buying, put the item in the cart and wait 24 hours, then decide. The goal isn't deprivation, it's freedom to choose. And now the loop opens naturally toward the next lesson. Once someone stops being poisoned by pleasure, they often swing too far the other way. They get strict, harsh, disciplined. Like suffering is proof they're growing. They start starving the body to purify the spirit. So the mentor leans in and asks, what if the trap isn't only indulgence, but also punishment? That's when the next story arrives, the fast that starved the soul. He thought pain meant progress. So when his body begged for rest, he called it weakness. When hunger showed up, he labeled it attachment. When exhaustion hit, he treated it like proof he was doing it right. At first, it felt heroic, like he was finally in control. But slowly, the hero's story turned into a cage. In this story, the monk becomes legendary for discipline, the kind of person others admire from a safe distance. He eats less, sleeps less, denies more, and wears suffering like a medal. And the tricky part is, people praise him for it. Praise is its own kind of honey, remember? So now the monk isn't just starving, he's performing starvation. He's convinced enlightenment is found through total denial. So he goes extreme, days on water, thin as a shadow, eyes hollow, movements slow. And inside his mind, there's this quiet pride. Look how strong I am. But at the same time, he's losing something essential. He's losing warmth. He's losing the ability to feel compassion without effort. Then comes the boy, not a scholar, not a monk, not someone with spiritual vocabulary, just a kid with rice and vegetables, passing by with simple goodness. And that's the genius of the parable. Sometimes wisdom doesn't arrive dressed as wisdom. Sometimes it arrives as a child asking, "Why are you hurting yourself?" And the question lands because it's innocent, not judgmental. The boy offers food with zero philosophy. No lecture, no "you should," no superiority, just kindness. And that kindness breaks something open that discipline couldn't touch. The monk feels it. Not just calories, but connection. A warmth he forgot existed. The mentor highlights the non-obvious point. Extreme self-denial can look spiritual, but it often becomes self-violence in a holy costume. It can be ego, just wearing simpler clothes. And ego loves extremes because extremes feel like control. Either I'm perfect or I'm nothing. That's not wisdom. That's pressure. So the monk goes to Buddha, confused and humble. And Buddha answers with a metaphor that's almost too simple. A bird needs two wings to fly. One wing is discipline, the other wing is compassion. If you only train discipline, you become rigid and cold. If you only train compassion, you can become soft and avoidant. This two wings image is powerful because it's instantly visual. People feel it. They can picture someone flapping in circles, exhausted, getting nowhere. That's what life looks like when someone is only harsh or only indulgent. And most people swing between the two. 1 week extreme diet, the next week emotional binge. The mentor brings it to modern life with a blunt example. Some people go to the gym like they're punishing a criminal. They don't train, they attack themselves. Then they wonder why they can't stay consistent, because the body remembers cruelty. It resists what feels like danger. He gives another example. Work. People overwork, skip meals, skip sleep, and call it ambition. But deep down, it's fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being enough. And the mind loves to justify it. I'm just responsible. Yet the cost shows up later. Irritability, anxiety, numbness, resentment. That's the soul starving while the schedule looks impressive. So the practice for the week is simple and slightly uncomfortable. Ask daily, am I treating myself the way I'd treat a dear friend? Because most people would never talk to a friend the way they talk to themselves. They'd never demand perfection with zero tenderness. They'd never say, "You don't deserve rest." But they say it to themselves like it's normal. He offers practical steps, not vague inspiration. If the body is tired, take a 20-minute nap, or at least a 10-minute eyes-closed reset. If you're hungry, eat something real, protein, fruit, water, before you make life decisions. If your mind is racing, do a slow walk and name 5 things you see. If you're harsh with yourself, rewrite one sentence in a kinder way, like, "I'm behind" becomes, "I'm learning pace." He also recommends a balanced discipline routine that actually sticks. Instead of extreme habits, choose small practices you can keep on your worst day. 5 minutes of breathing, 10 minutes of reading something wise, 1 act of kindness, 1 boundary. Because the goal isn't to impress your future self. The goal is to support your real self. Then he slips in a little humor to cut through the pride. He says, if your spirituality makes you grumpy, it's probably not enlightenment, it's low blood sugar. And people laugh because it's true. Sometimes the dark night of the soul is just exhaustion, and wisdom includes knowing the difference. The body is not the enemy, it's the vehicle. And here's the loop into the next story. Once people stop punishing themselves, they face a new fear. If I soften, Will I become selfish? So the next teaching arrives to challenge that fear. It shows a king who gives, and then faces the ultimate test of generosity. The mentor leans in. What does real giving look like when it actually costs you something? And the next topic opens. The gift that cost everything. He used to believe generosity was what you did when you had extra. Extra money, extra time, extra patience, extra energy. But life rarely gives you extra, does it? So he stayed generous in theory and tight-fisted in practice. Then he realized something uncomfortable. Sometimes the real thing you're holding isn't your wallet. It's your identity. In this story, there's a king known for giving. Not the social media kind of giving that comes with a photo and applause. Real giving, daily giving, quiet giving. Food, shelter, medicine. He gives like it's normal. And everyone praises him, which is exactly where the test begins. Because being seen as good can be another kind of attachment. A stranger arrives in humble clothing, but his eyes are sharp, like he's not there for charity. He's there for truth. He asks the king a dangerous question. Is there anything you wouldn't give? And the king answers confidently, I'd give anything. That's the moment the story tightens, like a knot. The sage presses, then give me your life. Silence drops, because now it's not about coins or food. It's about the deepest attachment, survival, status, control, fear. The king doesn't hesitate. That's what shocks everyone, not because he's reckless, but because his heart is strangely free. He's not negotiating with the request, he's meeting it. The mentor makes the meaning super clear. The king isn't glorifying self-destruction. He's demonstrating something rarer, a heart not chained to me first. He's showing that love, when it's real, doesn't keep a scoreboard. And yes, that's hard to swallow in a culture built on self-protection. But that's why people feel this story in their chest. Then the story brings in the crowd begging him not to do it. And here's the subtle twist. They're not selfish. They genuinely need him. So now we see the tension between sacrifice and responsibility. The king responds tenderly, but remains open-handed. He doesn't cling to his role. At the last moment, the beggar reveals himself as a sage. It was a test. And the point lands. Most people give what they can afford to lose. But freedom is shown when you can release what you can't afford to lose. Not because you hate life, because you understand life is bigger than your grip. That hits deep. The mentor uses an analogy that makes it instantly relatable. He says, attachment is like holding sand in a clenched fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips out. But if you open your hand, the sand stays. That's the paradox. Clinging doesn't protect. Clinging damages. And people recognize this in relationships, jobs, and even self-image. He also gives a personal example that doesn't sound holy, just real. He remembers a time he needed to be right in an argument. He could feel the heat rising, the ego sharpening its knives. And then he noticed winning would cost the relationship. So he practiced generosity in a new form. He gave up being right. Not because he was weak, because peace was worth more than victory. This is where the practical generosity practice becomes powerful. He doesn't tell people to donate half their income. He tells them to release one tight grip per day, one small attachment. Like, stop refreshing for validation. Stop forcing someone to respond. Stop replaying a mistake like it's your identity. Stop gripping an outcome like your life depends on it. He gives examples people can actually do. If you're attached to recognition, do one kind act anonymously. If you're attached to control, let someone else choose the restaurant and don't comment. If you're attached to being needed, say no once and survive the discomfort. If you're attached to perfection, post the thing, send the message, start the project messy. These are not little things. They're training wheels for freedom. He also reframes generosity as something that makes you bigger, not smaller, because the fear is always, if I give, I'll lose. But generosity often creates space. Less tension, less anxiety, more connection, like opening a window in a room that's been locked for years. The air changes instantly. You realize you were suffocating under your own grip. A small humor line slips in to keep it human. He says, "Your ego is like a dragon guarding a treasure chest, full of rocks. It acts like it's protecting gold. But half the time it's protecting pride, grudges, and outdated stories. When you let go, you discover you weren't losing treasure. You were dropping weight, and the loop to the next story opens naturally. Once someone practices generosity, they start seeing a deeper kind of wealth. Not money wealth, inner wealth. They start noticing they already have more than they thought. So the next teaching comes as a surprise. A beggar who owns everything because he finally learns what real richness is. Most people think wealth is what you can show. A car, a house, a phone that doesn't freeze when you open 3 apps. So when life strips those things away, or when you never had them, the mind starts whispering, you're behind, you're less, you're poor. And that whisper is heavy, because it doesn't just describe a bank account, it tries to describe a human being. This story starts with a beggar walking through dust and judgment, clothes patched, feet tough, bowl empty, eyes avoided by strangers. And he carries the kind of shame that doesn't need words, the shame of being treated like you're invisible. Yet something pulls him toward the Buddha's teaching, not hope like fireworks, hope like a tiny candle refusing to die. He approaches after the crowd disperses, and he asks for something to relieve his suffering. He expects coins, food, maybe a blessing, because when you're struggling, your brain thinks in survival language. But Buddha doesn't give him anything external. Instead, he asks a question that feels almost irritating at first. What do you already possess? The beggar says, nothing. And honestly, most people would agree with him. But Buddha goes one layer deeper, like turning a key inside the mind. Do you have your eyes? The question sounds too simple, until Buddha asks the next part. Would you trade them for a chest of gold? Now the beggar reacts with real emotion. Never. Because suddenly, he's not thinking like a victim. He's thinking like someone protecting something sacred. And that's the first crack in the old belief. He realizes there are things in him that money can't replace. Then it continues. Hands, legs, mind, breath. Each question is like a mirror held up to his life. And with every, I would never trade that, the beggar's posture changes. Not because his situation changed, because his measure of value changed. He stops counting only what's missing and starts noticing what's present. The mentor points out why this hits people so hard. Because modern life trains the brain to ignore what's stable. We stop noticing what works until it breaks. You don't celebrate your lungs on a normal day. You celebrate them when you can't breathe. So the story rewires attention back toward the invisible treasures. Then comes the neuroscience reference. Gratitude, intervention. Hedonic adaptation. But the way it's delivered matters. It's not academic. It's like your mind undervalues what you already have and overestimates what the next thing will fix. That's a punchline people recognize instantly because they've bought the thing, reached the goal, got the validation, and still felt empty 2 days later. The analogy that lands here is beautiful. Dying of thirst while standing in a flowing river. That's the beggar's life. And honestly, it's also the life of many successful people. They have access to peace, but they don't know how to see it. They chase the cup, not the water. They chase the symbol, not the substance. The practical exercise is simple but powerful. Hand on chest. Feel heartbeat. One conscious breath. Look around and name 3 things your eyes can see right now. It's not positive thinking. It's a training of attention, like teaching your mind to stop sprinting and start seeing. Because peace isn't always a new event. Sometimes it's your nervous system remembering it's safe. Then the mentor makes it personal in a way that feels real. He describes waking up on a rough morning, tired, mind heavy, life loud. And instead of doing the usual fix everything, he starts with inventory. I can breathe, I can see, I can walk, I can learn. And he admits something honest. It doesn't delete problems, but it changes the inner posture facing the problems. You stop moving like someone cursed and start moving like someone capable. He gives examples that connect with everyday life. If you have a phone and internet, you have access to libraries. If you have working hands, you can learn a skill. If you have legs, you can walk 15 minutes and reset your stress chemistry. If you have a mind, you can choose what you feed it. Less doom scrolling, more calm input, more silence. He treats the body like a miracle without sounding cheesy. A tiny humor moment keeps it grounded. He jokes that people treat their body like an old car. Only notice it when the engine light turns on. But the body is a gift, doing 1,000 jobs silently. And laughter here helps the lesson sink in without preaching. And then the loop opens perfectly into the next topic. Once you recognize wealth that can't be stolen, you become curious about truth itself. But truth has a trap. Partial truth can make you arrogant. So the next story arrives like a warning. 6 blind men touching an elephant, each convinced they have the whole truth. He didn't lose friendships because he was wrong. He lost them because he was certain. Certain in that tight way that leaves no room for anyone else's reality. And the worst part is, he wasn't lying. He really did have evidence. He really did have experiences. He was right, just not complete. This story begins with a king who's tired of arguments, scholars debating, everyone claiming they own the truth. So he sets up an experiment that feels like a mirror for modern life. He brings 6 blind men to an elephant. Each man touches one part and then declares what an elephant is. And instantly you can see where this is going. The first touches the flank and says, "It's a wall." The second touches the tusk and says, "No, it's a spear." The third grabs the trunk. "You're both wrong, it's a snake." The fourth hugs a leg. "It's a tree." The fifth touches the ear. "It's a fan." The sixth holds the tail. "It's a rope." And the argument escalates because each one is describing something real. That's the brilliance. Nobody is making things up. They're just trapped inside a partial experience. And the more they argue, the more they confuse my part with the whole. The elephant stands calmly in the middle like reality itself, unbothered by how loud humans get. The mentor explains why audiences love this story, because it makes people feel seen without being attacked. It shows that conflict isn't always about good versus evil. It's often about limited perspective versus limited perspective. And in a world of hot takes and instant certainty, that feels like medicine. He connects it to modern cognitive science in a simple way. The brain filters reality. It highlights what matches your past experience and ignores what doesn't. So when someone disagrees with you, your mind doesn't just hear different, it hears threat. Then it activates defense mode. Arguments, sarcasm, superiority, shutting down. He gives a personal example that sounds painfully normal. He remembers arguing with someone close, both convinced, both hurt. Later, when emotions cooled, he realized they weren't fighting about facts. They were fighting about meaning. He was touching the tusk of logic. The other person was touching the ear of emotion, and neither of them was willing to walk around the elephant. The metaphor becomes super practical through one question. What part of the elephant am I touching right now? That question is a mental break. It stops the ego from sprinting toward victory. It shifts the goal from win to understand. And people love it because it's simple enough to use mid-conflict. The mentor also warns, this isn't everything is relative. It's not saying all opinions are equal. It's saying all perspectives are partial. Truth is often bigger than one angle. So wisdom is the ability to hold your view strongly enough to live by it, but lightly enough to update it. He gives real-life applications that hit everyday pain points. In a relationship, one person touches security, the other touches freedom. In parenting, one touches discipline, the other touches gentleness. At work, one touches results, the other touches well-being. Online, one touches facts, the other touches identity. When you notice the part being touched, you stop villainizing the person. Then he offers a practice that feels almost like a game. Next time you disagree with someone, don't respond immediately. Ask 2 questions. What are they protecting? What are they afraid of losing? Because most arguments aren't about ideas, they're about fear in disguise. He also suggests a 2-minute walk-around habit. Before you form a hard opinion, gather 2 other perspectives. Not to become confused, to become whole. Read a different viewpoint. Ask someone you trust, or simply say, I might be missing a piece. That sentence alone can save relationships. A light humor line shows up here too. He jokes, the ego doesn't want truth, it wants a trophy. And that's why debates get addictive. Winning feels like identity validation, but understanding feels like peace. So the story subtly invites the viewer to choose peace over trophies. And here's the loop into the next topic. Once someone learns perspective, they start seeing generosity differently too. They realize value isn't only in price, but in sacrifice and intention. So the next story becomes deeply emotional. A poor weaver with one old robe offering everything he has. And suddenly, the audience faces a question. What do I give when nobody is watching? He used to think generosity was measured by the size of the gift, like the world does. Bigger donation, bigger sacrifice, bigger applause. But life teaches a quieter truth. The real weight of giving is not what leaves your hands. It's what leaves your ego. That's why this story feels so strong. Because it doesn't center on rich people being kind. It centers on someone poor doing something that most comfortable people can't even imagine doing without panic. A simple village weaver owns almost nothing, and his entire world fits inside one worn robe, patched and faded, passed down like a family relic. The kind of cloth that has seen more winters than praise. When he hears the Buddha is coming, his heart ignites with a desire to offer something. But immediately, that desire collides with shame. Everyone else will bring silk, jewels, precious objects, and he has an old robe that barely qualifies as clothing. And that internal battle is painfully relatable, because people don't only feel poor with money, they feel poor with talent, with time, with confidence, with worth. And they start thinking, why would my little effort matter next to everyone else? But the weaver reaches a moment of courage that feels like a small spiritual rebellion. He chooses not to offer what looks impressive. He offers what is true, the only thing he has. When the ceremony begins, the wealthy step forward first, and the gifts are beautiful. Shimmering fabric, golden jewelry, offerings that could change a family's life. And the crowd silently agrees. These are worthy gifts. The weaver stays at the back, clutching his folded robe, and you can almost feel his throat tighten. Because now his offering feels like an embarrassment wrapped in cloth. And his mind starts doing what minds do, predicting ridicule, rejection, humiliation. But then the Buddha's eyes meet his, and that gaze matters, because it doesn't carry the usual social math of value. It carries acceptance, and acceptance is what gives the weaver the strength to move forward. He walks through the crowd with trembling hands, and with every step, he's not just approaching a teacher. He's confronting a lifetime of feeling less, and refusing to let that feeling decide his actions. When he finally offers the robe, he admits the truth without drama. I have no gold, no jewels. This is everything I own, and I give it with devotion and gratitude. That line hits people because it's the kind of honesty that cannot be faked. He isn't performing humility. He's living it, and the audience senses the purity of it. Then comes the moment that flips the entire room. The Buddha doesn't just accept the robe politely. He receives it with reverence, the same reverence he would give to a sacred relic. And the shocking part is what happens next. He puts the robe on, over his own garments, in front of everyone, which instantly redefines value in the minds of the crowd. The mentor makes the lesson painfully simple. Most people give a portion. This man gave 100% to you, and the percentage matters more than the price tag, because the sacrifice reveals the heart. It's like two people donating. One gives a tiny fraction and feels nothing. The other gives what they actually feel. And suddenly, the act becomes a transformation, not a transaction. This is why audiences love these stories. They don't feel like moral lectures. They feel like emotional mirrors, because everyone has something they protect, something they won't risk, something they keep just in case. And the robe becomes a symbol of that one thing you cling to, not because it's valuable objectively, but because you fear who you'll be without it. The story also sneaks in something modern and real. Giving isn't just nice, it changes the brain, and people feel that truth in their own lives when they help someone, and later notice they feel lighter, calmer, more human. The mentor connects it to that helper's high feeling, not as a scientific lecture, but as lived experience. When you give sincerely, your chest opens, your mind quiets, and you sleep differently because you're not at war with life. He shares a personal example that doesn't sound heroic, just honest. A moment where he gave up an opportunity to look superior in a conversation and instead chose kindness, and later realized that peace was worth more than winning. He makes it practical in everyday terms. Generosity isn't only money, it can be patience, attention, forgiveness, time, and even silence when your ego wants the last word. He gives examples the viewer can apply immediately. Reply with calm to someone rude. Help a friend without turning it into a story. Donate a small amount consistently. Share a useful skill with someone who's struggling, or simply listen without interrupting for once. And then he adds the twist people don't expect. The hardest generosity is often giving up the need to be seen as generous, because the ego loves charity as long as it comes with a spotlight. A light humor line keeps it human. He says the ego loves to donate with a receipt, because it wants proof that it's a good person, and everyone laughs because they've done some version of that, even if only in their head. But the real teaching is serious. The weaver's robe was precious because it was clean of performance. It was honest sacrifice, and honesty has a weight that gold can't imitate. And that's the loop. Once the viewer understands this kind of giving, they start questioning the idea of freedom, because true generosity requires freedom from attachment, and freedom always asks for a choice. So the next story naturally arrives: a golden fish, rare and priceless, caught in a net, and a fisherman forced to choose between profit and compassion. And the moment the net tightens, the viewer feels the question tightening too. If you could gain something, but it would cost your heart, what would you choose? He learned that the mind has a weird habit. It calls greed being practical, and calls compassion being naive. And that's why this story grabs people by the collar, because it puts a real temptation in the listener's hands, not a theoretical lesson. A golden fish isn't just a pretty image. It's every moment life offers a shortcut, a profit, a win, a little advantage you can justify. The mentor frames it like this: the most dangerous traps don't look like traps. They look like opportunities with good timing. So the question isn't, is the fisherman evil? But what happens inside a normal person when an easy reward appears? And almost everyone recognizes that inner tug of war because they've lived it in smaller versions all week long. In the emerald forest, the river runs like a quiet promise, and a golden fish moves through it like a rumor made real. It's the kind of beauty that makes people forget boundaries, because humans often confuse rare with mine. When a fisherman arrives, he isn't starving. He's chasing the story of a catch that could upgrade his whole life overnight. That detail matters, because desperation would make his choice obvious. But desire is trickier than hunger. Desire doesn't scream, it whispers, "You deserve this." And it sounds exactly like common sense. So when the net tightens, it's not just a fish being caught, it's a person being tested. He pulls the net in and sees the scales gleam like liquid gold, and his brain instantly does the math. Rent paid, debt gone, a better house, new respect, maybe even a future where he's finally not afraid of tomorrow. The mentor calls this the cinema of the mind, where one object becomes a whole movie of salvation in 5 seconds. And that's how attachment forms, not from the thing itself, but from the story we glue onto it. The fisherman's hands grip tighter because his nervous system says, "This is security, don't let it slip." And right there, the listener feels it too, because they've held on to things for the same reason. Then the story flips into the impossible. The fish speaks, calmly, clearly, like a conscience with fins. It doesn't threaten him, it invites him, which is exactly how real transformation enters, quietly, without force. The fish says freedom is worth more than gold, and the fisherman laughs inside because freedom doesn't pay bills. That response is so human it hurts, because he's not being cruel. He's being conditioned by survival. The mentor points out a hard truth. Many people don't choose money because they love money. They choose it because they fear life. And fear makes even gentle people do tight-fisted things. The fish offers a different kind of wealth. The peace of choosing mercy over profit, love over advantage. The fisherman counters with reality. Words don't buy food. And he's not wrong on the surface. This is why the story works, because it respects the struggle. It doesn't shame the listener for living in a real world. The mentor adds an analogy. It's like being offered a relationship built on trust, but rejecting it because trust can't be deposited in a bank. Yet anyone who's lost sleep over money knows this. A full wallet doesn't automatically create a calm mind. So the real question becomes, what kind of wealth lasts after the money is spent? At that moment, traveling monks appear, and the Buddha is with them, like the embodiment of a deeper option. Buddha doesn't shout, doesn't judge, doesn't romanticize poverty. He simply names the crossroads with precision. He asks what brings lasting satisfaction, possessing something beautiful, or letting beauty remain free. That question lands like a stone dropped into still water, because it reveals the hidden cost of ownership. The mentor clarifies, ownership can be a form of fear management. If it's mine, it can't leave me, betray me, or disappear. But life doesn't sign contracts with our control, and that's why clinging always ends in tension. Now the fisherman looks again, and the fish stops being a product and becomes a being. This is the pivot point of empathy. The moment the other stops being it and becomes someone. The mentor connects it to everyday life. It's the second you remember the rude cashier is also tired, or the angry driver is also stressed. Empathy doesn't excuse harm, but it changes the inner temperature, and that temperature changes decisions. The fisherman feels torn because greed is loud, but compassion is heavy in a different way, heavy with meaning. And meaning is the one currency the nervous system can't easily ignore. The fish promises gratitude, but more importantly, it promises something internal. Releasing it will free something in the fisherman too. The mentor calls that the prison of needing. The cage built from believing happiness comes from taking. He gives a practical example. Someone fights to win an argument, gets the win, and still feels empty afterward. Or someone buys something expensive for a dopamine hit, and 3 days later, the mind is already chasing the next thing. So the fish isn't just a fish, it's the symbol of every shiny solution that doesn't solve the real hunger. And the real hunger is usually peace, dignity, and a sense of being enough. Here's the practice the mentor sneaks into the story without making it feel like homework. He says, pick one thing you're gripping tightly right now. Maybe a grudge, a need to be right, or a fear of losing control. Then imagine loosening that grip by 5%, not $50, because the mind rebels against extreme changes. If it's a grudge, write one sentence. I don't forgive to excuse them, I forgive to stop poisoning myself. If it's control, delegate one small task and resist hovering like a helicopter with anxiety. The point is to train the body that release can be safe, even when the mind says it's dangerous. Modern science gets folded in as a bridge, but the mentor uses it like seasoning, not like a textbook. He mentions that compassion activates calming chemicals and creates a steady kind of well-being that thrill-chasing can't match. Then he gives a street-level translation. Helping someone can feel like your chest gets wider, like you can breathe again. That sensation is real, and it's why some people who have very little still sleep better than those who own everything. He's not preaching poverty. He's exposing the lie that profit automatically equals relief. And once the listener feels that possibility, the story starts doing inner work on them quietly. The fisherman asks, how do I know you won't just escape and give me nothing? Which is honest and human. The fish replies, the reward is the knowledge of who he chose to be in that moment, and that's a rare kind of wealth. The mentor translates, identity is the only thing you truly carry everywhere, even when the bank balance changes. He offers an analogy. It's like choosing to be the person who returns a lost wallet, even when nobody is watching. You don't get a trophy, but you get something stronger: self-trust. The quiet confidence that you're not owned by impulse. And self-trust becomes a foundation that money alone can't build. So the fisherman lowers the net back into the river, opens it, and the golden fish circles once like a blessing. The moment is written as a physical release and an emotional expansion, because that's how real letting go feels. Instead of loss, he feels relief, an unexpected lightness, like he's been carrying a heavy bag he forgot was on his shoulder. The mentor highlights the paradox. Sometimes you lose the thing and finally gain your breath back. That's why people love this moment. It's a fantasy of freedom, but also a blueprint for the nervous system. It whispers, you can choose compassion and survive, and maybe even thrive. Later, the fisherman becomes the storyteller, which is always the sign of a true turning point. He doesn't brag about moral superiority. He remembers it as the moment his life began to feel clean inside. The mentor adds a personal feeling parallel. The first time someone walked away from a deal that felt wrong, their wallet shrank, but their sleep improved. And sleep is a blunt truth teller. If your conscience is loud, your pillow won't be soft no matter how rich you are. So the fisherman's profit becomes peace, and peace becomes the kind of wealth you stop wanting to trade away. That's the hook that keeps viewers listening, because everyone is tired of winning and still feeling restless. Now the narrative naturally opens the next door with a darker contrast, like a shadow following a candle. Because once you talk about mercy, the next question is, what about people who've done terrible things? Are they redeemable too? The mentor hints that compassion isn't just for cute golden fish. It's also for broken humans who became dangerous. And that's where the next story comes in. Angulimala, the criminal who found light. The one everyone feared. He sets the loop gently. If a heart that far gone can stop running, what does that say about your own patterns? And just like that, the listener is pulled forward, needing to hear what happens when darkness meets compassion. He learned that people don't become monsters overnight. They become tired, then bitter, then numb. And one day, they can't recognize themselves. That's why this story hits like a drum in the chest. Because it's not just about violence. It's about the moment a person realizes, I'm still running. The mentor frames it carefully. Redemption isn't a reward for good behavior. It's a door that opens when the mind finally stops lying to itself. So Angulimala isn't presented as a cartoon villain, but as a human who got twisted by betrayal, shame, and a mind that couldn't find its way back. And the viewer listens longer because deep down, everyone fears their own worst version is closer than they like to admit. The promise is simple and terrifying. If he can change, then your excuses start looking a little thin. In the ancient forest, fear has a name, and that name is Angulimala. Garland of fingers, a title built from horror. Villagers whisper it like a curse. Mothers use it like a threat. Soldiers avoid the woods because courage feels useless against madness. Around his neck hangs the necklace of his crimes, and the story makes you feel the weight of it, not just see it. But then, the narrative pulls a surprise. He wasn't born like this. He wasn't always darkness with a heartbeat. He was once Ahimsaka, harmless one, raised with kindness, a boy with a normal future before the mind got poisoned. And that reveal matters, because it tells the listener, evil actions often grow from pain, confusion, and manipulation. The mentor doesn't over-explain. He lets betrayal do the work like acid on metal. A jealous teacher manipulates, whispers, twists the young man's trust into paranoia, his devotion into rage, his innocence into obsession. And that's the first modern mirror. Not everyone is stabbed with knives. Some are stabbed with words, rumors, humiliation, and the slow theft of self-worth. He adds a relatable analogy. It's like someone who gets cheated on, then starts treating every new relationship like a courtroom trial. At first, it looks like being careful, but over time, it becomes a prison where love can't breathe. Angulimala's prison just happens to be louder, bloodier, and more obvious. But the mechanism is heartbreak plus confusion. Now he lives by a new identity, and identity is a dangerous drug when it's built on fear. He kills not only for the act, but because killing keeps the story going. I'm too far gone, I can't stop, I'm this person now. The mentor calls it the point of no return illusion, the belief that because you've fallen, you must keep falling. People do this with smaller things. I already ate junk today, so I may as well binge, or I already messed up, so why try? Angulimala does it with violence, but the engine is the same. Shame that refuses to accept a new chapter, and shame always tries to make permanence out of a temporary failure. On a misty morning, Angulimala crouches behind a tree, hunting the final finger to complete his collection. The detail is grotesque on purpose. It shows how far obsession can go when the mind loses its center. Then a lone monk appears on the path, walking with the calm pace of someone who isn't negotiating with fear. Angulimala roars, threatens, demands he stop, and the monk keeps moving like the forest itself is safe. That mismatch is the first shock. Violence expects panic, and calm is a kind of power it can't compute. The mentor hints that peace can be so steady it becomes unsettling to chaos. Angulimala runs, weapons raised, ready to end the monk, and somehow he can't catch him. This is the story's magic trick, but it's also a psychological metaphor. The more frantic the mind gets, the less it can reach what it wants. He is sprinting after stillness, chasing peace with aggression, trying to control an outcome by force. The mentor uses a modern image. It's like trying to sleep by yelling at your brain. Sleep now, and the brain laughs and spins faster. Or trying to calm anxiety by Googling symptoms for 3 hours. Your legs stop, but your mind keeps running. Angulimala is literally out of breath. But the deeper exhaustion is spiritual. Finally, he stops, gasping, and shouts, "Stop running from me!" And the monk turns. It is the Buddha. No fear, no hatred. Only a gaze that sees through the costume of violence. And then comes the line that makes the whole story. I have stopped. It is you who are still running. The mentor pauses here like a musician holding silence, because the listener needs time to feel the sentence land. He explains it in plain language. The body can be still while the heart is sprinting toward revenge, validation, control, escape. So the teaching isn't about feet. It's about the inner engine that never shuts off. Angulimala's weapons lower, not because he suddenly became kind, but because truth cut through him. For the first time in years, curiosity appears. Real curiosity. Not the hungry curiosity of a predator, but the human kind that asks, "What do you mean?" Buddha answers without lecture. Stopping means no longer running from suffering, no longer fleeing the present, no longer feeding the fire with more fuel. The mentor translates, it's the difference between reacting and responding, between impulse and awareness, between I can't help it and I can observe it. Then he gives a practical mirror. When anger rises, most people sprint, texting, shouting, proving, punishing, escaping silence. But the moment you can watch the anger, you've already slowed down, and slowing down is the beginning of freedom. Now the story turns from epic to intimate. Angulimala suddenly feels the necklace as unbearable, like carrying your worst regrets on your skin. He sees himself, and he cries. First tears in years, and that is the moment viewers secretly hope for in their own lives. Because people don't just want change, they want proof that change is possible after damage, after mistakes, after years of wrong turns. The mentor says gently, tears are often the first honest thing the body does when the mind finally stops defending its mess. He offers an analogy. It's like cleaning a room you avoided for months. The first step is seeing the dirt without excuses. And seeing it doesn't kill you. It actually starts saving you. Angulimala asks the question every ashamed person asks. Is there hope for someone like me? Buddha answers with the core idea of Buddha nature, the belief that the pure essence isn't destroyed, only buried. The mentor makes it accessible. Imagine the sun behind thick storm clouds. Storms can hide it, but they can't erase it. He adds a modern parallel. A person can do awful things and still not be permanently reduced to their worst moment. That doesn't erase consequences, and the story doesn't pretend it does. It just refuses to declare a human being as permanently hopeless. And that refusal is exactly what makes the teaching feel both compassionate and strong. Here comes the practice. And the mentor keeps it real, so it doesn't feel like fantasy morality. He says, identify where you're running right now, maybe from a difficult conversation, a health check, a debt plan, a grieving process, or your own self-respect. Then do one small stopping action today. Write the first message, schedule the appointment, open the bank app, sit in silence for 2 minutes. Not to punish yourself, just to face reality without sprinting away from it. He suggests tools, a simple breath count, inhale 4, exhale 6, journaling 1 honest paragraph, or a short walk with no headphones. Stopping is training your mind to stay in the room with your own life. The story continues. Angulimala drops the necklace, throws down the weapons, and begs to be taught. This is the part people love because it's a clean symbol. The body releases what the soul is tired of carrying. The mentor adds a subtle insight. Transformation becomes possible when identity shifts from I am my past to I am my next choice. And that's what the Buddha offers. Discipline and compassion, not indulgence and not condemnation. The listener recognizes it as the kind of guidance they wish they'd had when they were spiraling. Firm, but not cruel. Because cruelty doesn't reform the heart. It just teaches it to hide better. Then the mentor highlights the uncomfortable truth. Redemption doesn't mean everyone applauds you. Even after Angulimala changes, the world doesn't instantly forget. Consequences still exist. Trust still takes time. And that's fair. This part matters for credibility, because real viewers know life doesn't do instant forgiveness arcs like a movie montage. So the lesson becomes deeper. You don't change to be liked. You change because continuing is too expensive internally. He gives an analogy. Quitting an addiction isn't a PR strategy. It's a survival strategy for the soul. And once you understand that, you stop begging the world for permission to improve. Now the topic opens the next door smoothly. After redemption, the next question is emotional regulation. Because even a changed person still has storms. Anger, jealousy, pride. So how do you deal with emotions without fighting them? The mentor sets the hook. What if the biggest battle isn't against the world, but against the stirring of your own mind? And that's where the next story arrives, like a clear pool in the forest, the mirror that showed everything. He plants the teaser. If you stop stirring the water, you start seeing the truth again. And the listener naturally leans forward, ready for the next teaching. He learned that most people spend their whole lives trying to feel full of praise, full of certainty, full of achievements, then wonder why they still feel restless. This story works because it flips the instinct. The thing that makes the bowl valuable isn't what's painted on it. It's the empty space inside. The mentor uses that to hit a modern nerve. We keep stuffing our days with noise, goals, notifications, and then complain we can't breathe. So the bowl becomes an everyday mirror, simple, humble, almost boring, until the listener realizes, wait, that's me. And when a teaching can live in your kitchen cabinet, your desk drawer, and your daily schedule, people trust it more than big abstract philosophy. Because it's not spiritual, it's practical. Emptiness isn't nothingness. It's room to live. In the village, there's a potter with hands that have shaped clay for 40 years. The kind of skill that makes people travel just to buy his work. His shelves are full of bowls that shine like rainbows, cups delicate as a breath, vases that look like they could hold moonlight. And still, he's unhappy. Because mastery doesn't protect you from perfectionism, it sometimes feeds it. The mentor makes it relatable. You can be good at what you do and still feel like it's never enough, which is a sneaky kind of suffering. The potter wants to honor the Buddha's visit, and that desire turns into pressure, and pressure turns into obsession. And obsession always pretends it's devotion, when really it's fear of not being seen as worthy. For weeks, he tries harder, and the harder he tries, the more the work feels dead inside. He creates intricate patterns, rare glazes, clever shapes, everything that looks impressive in a photo or in someone else's approval. But each piece feels incomplete, like it's trying to shout, "Look at me," instead of quietly being what it is. The mentor explains the trap. When you create from ego, you're not making an object. You're making a request for validation. And validation is a hungry animal. It eats the compliment and asks for another one immediately. So the potter's frustration grows, not because he lacks talent, but because his mind won't let the work be enough. On the morning of the Buddha's arrival, he sits among dozens of rejected masterpieces, exhausted and embarrassed. This is the moment people recognize. The pile of almost right attempts, the sleepless nights, the feeling that nothing satisfies. Then something breaks, not in a dramatic way, but in a human way. He simply runs out of pretending. He takes a lump of clay with no plan, no strategy, no performance, and his hands move like they remember joy. And what emerges is the simplest bowl he has ever made. Plain, round, honest, almost embarrassingly ordinary. But it feels alive, because it wasn't made to impress. It was made to serve. He walks into the offering ceremony and sees silk that shimmers like sunlight, jewels that could feed families for years, gold that screams status. Holding his simple bowl, he feels tiny, like showing up to a luxury party wearing a clean t-shirt and real confidence. The mentor adds a gentle laugh here. The ego loves glitter, but the soul loves usefulness, and those two don't always agree. He offers the bowl anyway, admitting the truth. He tried to be perfect, failed, then stopped trying so hard and found something real. That honesty is the hidden gift. The bowl is just the carrier of it, because real devotion doesn't need makeup. It can show up plain and still be powerful. Now the Buddha receives the bowl with the same reverence he gives the expensive offerings, and that shocks the crowd. Then he holds it up and asks them to see its nature, and most people stare like, it's a bowl. And that's the genius. The teaching begins exactly where the mind thinks there's nothing to learn. The Buddha says the bowl's value is not in what it contains, but in its capacity to contain. Its usefulness comes from its emptiness. The mentor translates it into modern language. Your calendar is only helpful if it has space. Your mind is only wise if it has room. A cup that's already full can't receive tea, and a person who's already full of themselves can't receive peace. Then the story goes deeper without becoming complicated. Emptiness doesn't mean life is meaningless. It means we aren't fixed, locked, trapped inside one identity. We're flexible, responsive, capable of change. The mentor gives a clean analogy. A suitcase is useful because it has space. If it were solid metal inside, it would look fancy and do nothing. Or a phone needs storage. If it's completely full, it freezes, slows down, starts failing. People laugh because it's true. A mind packed with grudges, noise, and self-importance also starts lagging. So emptiness is not a void, it's functional freedom. The Buddha runs his finger along the rim and points out something subtle. The bowl doesn't compete with what it holds. If it holds water, it doesn't try to be more important than the water. It simply allows water to be water. The mentor hits the emotional truth. Many people can't do this. They interrupt, correct, one-up, compare, because their ego wants to stay loud. And that loudness is exhausting. It's like living with a TV on maximum volume in your own head. He adds a practical picture. Imagine listening to a friend without planning your reply, without turning their pain into your stage. That's empty bowl behavior, present, useful, not performing. Here comes the practice, simple enough to actually do, not just admire. For 1 week, the mentor says, choose one emptying habit a day. 10 minutes with no phone, no music, no scrolling, just being. Or clean one small space, one drawer, one corner. Because outer clutter often mirrors inner clutter, and cleaning can calm the nervous system. Or speak one sentence less in a conversation and listen one breath longer, letting the other person finish without your interruption. If you're ambitious, reduce one commitment you said yes to out of guilt, not alignment, because guilt fills the bowl with junk. The goal is to create space where wisdom can land, like rain finally reaching soil. The potter realizes the punchline. He spent weeks trying to put himself into the work, when the best work came when he got himself out of the way. The mentor makes it personal. People do this in relationships too, trying to be impressive instead of being real, or at work, trying to look productive instead of being effective, filling time with motion and calling it progress. He gives a book suggestion when applicable. The Practice by Seth Godin for creating without begging for approval, and Atomic Habits for building small space-making routines. Not because books are magic, but because they give language to what the bowl is teaching. Less ego, more function. And when the listener can name the pattern, they can change the pattern. The Buddha keeps the simple bowl and uses it daily, which turns the teaching into a living object, not a one-time speech. That detail matters because it shows respect. The plain thing becomes sacred through use, not through decoration. The mentor adds an analogy. Your best routines are usually boring. Drink water, walk, sleep, breathe, be consistent. But those boring things keep the mind from collapsing, like the bowl keeps food from spilling. So spiritual growth isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's learning to be steady and useful. And steadiness is exactly what most modern people are starving for. Then the topic opens a new door with a sharp twist. Emptiness is helpful, but boundaries matter too. Because being empty doesn't mean letting people dump poison into you, like a bowl that accepts anything without discernment. The mentor sets the hook. What happens when kindness becomes self-harm? When peace becomes passivity? And that leads perfectly into the next story. The serpent that poisoned itself, about nonviolence versus non-resistance. He leaves the subtle tease. Sometimes wisdom isn't biting, but it also isn't lying down to be crushed. And the listener is pulled forward, wanting to know how to stay kind without becoming a target. He learned that many people confuse peace with being easy to hurt, and then they call the pain spiritual. This story works because it corrects a common mistake. Nonviolence isn't the same as surrendering your dignity. The mentor makes it personal fast, because most listeners aren't being attacked by cobras or kings. They're being drained by relatives, bosses, exes, and friends. And the worst part is they often feel proud of it. Like suffering proves they're good people, when it's really just poor boundaries wearing a halo. So the serpent becomes a mirror, a being with power who refuses to use it, but forgets that refusing harm doesn't mean inviting abuse. That distinction is why people stay hooked, because it gives them permission to protect themselves without becoming cruel. In a lush valley, there lives a cobra known not for terror, but for wisdom and kindness, which already flips expectations. Animals seek his counsel. Humans leave offerings, and he takes vows of nonviolence, determined to never harm another being. The mentor highlights the beauty. He transformed fear into respect through consistent compassion, like someone who breaks generational anger. But then he introduces the real test. Goodness is easy when no one pushes it. It becomes complicated when someone exploits it. Because there's a point where being peaceful starts looking like being available for harm, and the world notices that weakness fast. The valley feels like your life before the boundary lesson. Calm, purposeful. And then people discover they can take without consequence. A group of village children finds the serpent, and at first there's curiosity, then respect, then something dangerous, confidence without wisdom. They notice he won't defend himself, and that discovery becomes intoxicating, like power in the hands of the immature. They throw stones, pull his tail, disrupt his meditation, and each day they return bolder because nothing stops them. The mentor makes a modern analogy. It's like the coworker who keeps dumping tasks on you because you always say, "No problem." Or the friend who always calls to vent, but never asks how you are because you're so strong. Strength becomes a trap when people confuse it with permission to be careless. The cobra endures, telling himself their cruelty is temporary, that patience is virtue, that suffering might be part of the path. And here, the mentor gets real. People do the same internal talk. It's fine. It's not worth conflict. I'll just let it go. But when letting it go becomes a daily habit of swallowing disrespect, the body starts keeping score. You feel it as tight shoulders, stomach tension, sudden exhaustion, and that sneaky resentment that shows up later like smoke. The cobra's scales dull, scars appear, his spirit breaks, and the valley that once felt peaceful becomes a playground for cruelty. That's what happens when boundaries disappear. Your sanctuary becomes someone else's entertainment. Then the Buddha arrives and sees the serpent battered and exhausted, and the story finally names the confusion. The cobra says, "I kept my vow, and it only invited more harm." Maybe force is the only language some understand. And the Buddha doesn't shame him for thinking that. He clarifies the principle with a calm, surgical truth. He says the cobra confused nonviolence with non-resistance, two words that look similar until they ruin your life. Nonviolence is refusing to harm. Non-resistance is refusing to protect yourself, which can actually teach others to be worse. That line hits hard because it reframes self-protection as compassion, not selfishness. The mentor makes the point super accessible. Kindness without boundaries is like leaving your front door wide open and calling theft humility. It's not spiritual, it's unsafe. And it doesn't help the thief become better, it helps them become bolder. The Buddha explains that true compassion sometimes includes consequences, because consequences are how immature minds learn. And that's the part people secretly want permission to believe, because many are stuck between two extremes, aggression or collapse. The teaching offers a third way, firm without hateful, strong without violent, clear without cruel. That balance is the medicine of this story, and it's why it feels so modern. The cobra asks the practical question, how do I set boundaries without harming them? I'm a serpent. Defense could kill. The Buddha answers with skillful means. You don't need to bite. You can rise up, spread your hood, hiss with authority. In other words, show capability, not cruelty. Communicate strength so your restraint is recognized as a choice, not helplessness. The mentor translates to daily life. You don't need to explode, but you do need to speak clearly. A calm no, a direct, that doesn't work for me, a I won't accept being spoken to like that, is the modern hood spread. It's amazing how many problems disappear when people realize you're not an easy target. Now the story shows the cobra doing it. The children arrive, ready for fun, and find a different presence waiting. He rises, spreads the hood, hisses, not to injure, but to announce, this stops here. And the children freeze because they remember reality. They're playing with something powerful, not a toy. He doesn't strike. He simply holds the line, then returns to stillness, making the message unmistakable. I could harm you, but I choose not to. However, I will no longer allow you to harm me. That sentence is the spine of the lesson. Restraint plus boundaries equals real peace. The mentor gives a practical boundary script because viewers need words, not just inspiration. He suggests 3. I understand you want this, but I'm not available. I can help once, not every day, and if this continues, I will step away. He adds a gentle humor. You can be enlightened and still mute a group chat. Buddha never said you must answer instantly. Then he gives a realistic step. Pick one small boundary this week, not 10, because people who try 10 boundaries at once panic and quit. Start with something tiny. Reply slower. Say no to one request. Stop explaining yourself like you're in court. When you feel guilty, remember, guilt is often just the sound of an old pattern dying. Then comes the deeper twist. Boundaries protect not only you, but the other person's future self. Because if they keep practicing disrespect on you, they get better at being disrespectful, and that ruins their life too. So your no isn't rejection, it's guidance. It tells them the line exists, and reality won't bend forever. The mentor makes an analogy. It's like letting a child touch a hot stove so they learn, versus calmly moving their hand and teaching safety. Boundaries are that calm move. Protective, not punitive, but absolutely firm. And the listener feels relief. because firm suddenly becomes spiritual, not selfish. Now the topic opens the next hook with a smooth bridge. Once you learn boundaries, you face a new question. How do you give without resentment? Because if you give with conditions, you start keeping mental receipts, and your kindness turns into a transaction. The mentor tees it up. What happens when generosity gets polluted by expectations, like a stream that gets tired of being used? And that leads perfectly into the next story. The water that refused to flow, about service, gratitude, and giving without poison in the heart. He leaves the teaser. You can protect your purity without abandoning your purpose. But how? And the listener naturally stays to find the answer. He learned that the final lesson isn't a secret technique. It's a shock to dependency, because people love wisdom but fear freedom. This ending works because it flips a common emotional contract. Teach me so I don't have to trust myself. The mentor uses a scene of loss, Buddha dying, because grief makes the heart open and the mind quiet enough to receive truth. Then the message lands like a paradox. The teacher says he was never the teacher, which feels almost offensive at first. But that tiny sting is what makes it memorable. The brain wakes up because it senses something important is happening. And once the listener understands, it becomes empowering. Peace stops being something you borrow and starts being something you uncover. The setting is cinematic. A full moon, the sal grove, disciples gathered, the air heavy with the feeling of end. This isn't casual. The mentor knows that humans pay attention when something precious is about to be lost. Buddha lies on his final bed, and the community gathers like a family around a grandfather's last words. That emotional frame is powerful because it matches modern fear. What if I lose the one thing that keeps me stable? People do this with teachers, partners, routines, even their phone. Remove it, and they panic because they never built inner ground. So the story begins right where people are most vulnerable, at the edge of uncertainty. Ananda, the loyal attendant, is grieving, and he asks what the audience secretly asks in daily life. How do we continue without you? Who will guide us? How do we know we're doing it right? That's the voice of every person who says, "Tell me what to do, because I don't trust my own judgment." The mentor keeps Ananda human, tears, trembling voice, so viewers feel permission to admit their own fear. And then Buddha responds in a way that refuses to feed dependency, even in the moment when dependency feels justified. That's what makes it so strong. Compassion doesn't mean giving people a crutch forever. Buddha says, "You ask as if I have been withholding something, but I already gave you everything." The disciples expect a final dramatic secret, like the last episode twist, and that expectation mirrors the modern mind. People want the one final hack, the ultimate mantra, the perfect method that ends discomfort permanently. But Buddha offers something scarier, responsibility. Because now you can't blame your confusion on missing information. The mentor makes this point gently. The craving for a final secret is often the mind's fear of practicing consistently. If you chase a new method, you don't have to face the boring truth. Change happens through repetition. Then the line drops. I am not your teacher. I have never been your teacher. You are your own teacher. That's the emotional earthquake, because it dismantles the hierarchy the mind loves. The mentor explains why it feels shocking. People confuse guidance with authority, and authority with safety. So if the authority disappears, they think safety disappears, even if safety was inside them the whole time. It's like believing a flashlight is the light. instead of realizing the flashlight only reveals what already exists. Buddha isn't removing love, he's removing illusion. He uses the finger and the moon analogy because it's simple enough for a child, yet deep enough for an adult. A finger points to the moon, but some people stare at the finger, worship the finger, argue about the finger. They miss the moon entirely, which is the truth inside their own awareness. The mentor connects it to modern life. People idolize influencers, gurus, and even productivity systems, then forget to live. They collect quotes like trophies, but their nervous system stays chaotic because the quotes never become practice. So Buddha says, stop clinging to the pointer and look where it points, into yourself. The lesson becomes personal. When Buddha taught about suffering, whose suffering was it describing? Yours. When he taught compassion, whose heart needed to open? Yours. So the mentor reframes it. The teacher's words are mirrors, not commands. They reflect your own capacity back to you. This is why the video hits. It gives people dignity. You are not broken. You are untrained. Untrained can be trained. And that's a hopeful message without fantasy. It's the difference between you need saving and you need remembering. A disciple asks, without you, how do we know what's true and what's opinion? That's the modern question too, especially in an internet world where everyone is a guru for 30 seconds. Buddha answers, the same awareness that recognizes truth in my words can recognize truth anywhere. The mentor translates it into a practice. Notice what brings clarity, humility, and compassion. Those are signs of truth. Notice what brings arrogance, agitation, and obsession. Those are signs of ego, wearing a spiritual costume. Truth leaves you freer. Ego leaves you tighter. Then, Buddha warns about what humans will do when they lose a teacher. Build statues, temples, rigid doctrines, hierarchies. Not because those are evil, but because the mind hates uncertainty and wants to outsource responsibility again. The mentor makes a sharp point. We love structure, but we often use structure to avoid intimacy with our own mind. So Buddha says, the Dharma needs no priests. Enlightenment recognizes no external authority, meaning don't hand your power away. This isn't anti-community, it's anti-dependence, and that nuance matters to keep it accessible and balanced. A good community supports your growth, a bad community replaces your inner compass. Now comes the weekly lamp practice. Simple enough to remember when half asleep. Every morning, before checking the phone, ask, what would my wisest self do in the first 10 minutes today? Then do one small thing. Drink water slowly. Breathe for 60 seconds. Make the bed. Stretch. Write one honest sentence. This is not self-help fluff. It's nervous system training. Small actions that tell the brain, I can guide my life. At night, ask, where did I outsource my power today? And where did I reclaim it? Just 2 lines in a note. Over a week, people feel the shift. Less panic, less clinging, more steadiness, because trust is built through evidence. The mentor also offers a practical honesty check. Trust doesn't mean I'm always right. It means I can learn, because self-trust is not arrogance, it's resilience. So if you make a mistake, you adjust. You don't collapse into shame and run back to dependency. This is the Napoleon Hill vibe. Faith plus action, not fantasy plus denial. And it keeps the tone uplifting but grounded. He adds a light joke. If your inner teacher sounds like a cruel boss, that's not wisdom. It's just your anxiety with a microphone. Wisdom is firm, but it doesn't humiliate you. The story then offers the final emotional gift. When I'm gone, don't mourn my absence. Celebrate the discovery of who you are. That's a direct hit to the listener's fear of being alone with themselves. Buddha reframes it. Every insight you gained was your own recognition of truth, not my magic power. So the mentor makes it intimate. The peace you felt while listening isn't trapped in the video. It's in your awareness. If you can notice these words, you can notice your breath, and if you can notice your breath, you can find stillness. The teacher leaves, but the seeing remains. Then the closing line, be lamps unto yourselves. Not be perfect, not never struggle, but stop living as if your light is rented. This ending keeps people satisfied because it ties every prior story together. The ox, the bowl, the bamboo, the mirror, the honey. They all point to the same thing. Your peace is not outside. It's the way you relate to what's happening inside. And the mentor leaves a final open loop that feels gentle. If you can be your own lamp, what happens when life gets hard tomorrow? That question keeps the viewer emotionally attached in a good way, curious, empowered, and wanting to stay with the channel. If you've made it this far, whether you listened wide awake or drifted in and out of sleep, something important already happened. Not because you learned facts, but because you experienced a different relationship with your own mind. You saw the patterns, the craving that looks sweet but poisons peace, the anger that stirs the water, the impatience that tries to force the tree. And you also saw the exit, awareness, flexibility, balance, compassion, and the courage to let go. That's not entertainment. That's training. And it actually works when you practice it in tiny, ordinary moments. So here's a real question. No performance, no pretending. What's your main burning house right now? Is it stress you keep normalizing, a habit you keep excusing, a relationship that drains you? Is it the constant need to be productive, liked, right, or in control? Pick one, just one. Because peace doesn't come from fixing your whole life at once. It comes from seeing clearly and taking the next wise step. This week, keep it simple. Choose one practice from tonight and repeat it daily. 3 conscious breaths before you react. Bend like bamboo when someone triggers you. Let the water settle instead of stirring it. Enjoy sweetness without clinging to it. Or sit for 60 seconds doing nothing, just being, so your nervous system remembers it's safe. Do that for 7 days, and watch what changes. Not outside, but inside. And if you want, write in the comments, I choose peace. The one thing you're letting go of this week. A grudge, an addiction to scrolling, perfectionism, jealousy, the need to control, whatever it is. Naming it is powerful, because once you name it, it stops owning you. And when you see other people writing theirs too, you realize you're not alone in this battle. If this helped you, subscribe to Buddhism every day and turn on notifications, because your mind will try to pull you back into old habits tomorrow, and you deserve a place that keeps bringing you back to what's real. For your next step, I recommend the end screen video, the mirror that showed everything, or the title you're using for it. It goes deeper into emotional storms, anger, anxiety, jealousy, and how to stop fighting them and start transforming them. Click it now and let this peace keep growing.